This broadcast of the Competizione Performance League World Series is brought to you by Malwa Transport, oversized cargo and trucking logistics specialists of Quebec. Visit their website on www.malwa-transport.ca. Good evening, race fans, and welcome back to TRTM for tonight's coverage of the season finale of the Competizione Performance League World Series, live exclusively on TRTN and powered by Malwa Transport. As always, I am Regan Clark. You join us here at the mighty Nurburgring, but unlike the Nordschleife, which we visited only a few days ago here on TRTN, you join us from the smaller and newer GP Strecke, introduced in 1985. Comprised of 16 turns and just under 3.2 miles of FIA Grade 1, it was introduced to replace the Nordschleife as the home of the German Grand Prix after the shocking events of the 1976 German Grand Prix. It would see racing from the mid-80s onwards intermittently, with its last Grand Prix race in Formula 1 being in 2020, under the guise of the Eiffel Grand Prix. Otherwise, it sees racing from the GT World Challenge Europe Series, from DTM, and from the European Truck Racing Championship, among others. And will be the final place then of Season 1 of the Competizione Performance League World Series as we reel away from what has been an astonishing last couple of months of racing, with plenty of twists and turns along the way. If you joined us last week at round 9 of the championship, you would have seen Christian Labbe wrap up his title in the Pro category. And things look set tonight for the wrap-up on the AM category as we head in to round 10. Taking a look here on the calendar, the last stop of the season. We visited Silverstone, Paul Ricard, Imola, Watkins Glen, the Red Bull Ring, Spa, Barcelona, Bathurst, and the Hungaroring on our way in towards this final round of the championship. And it all comes down to this. We're on board at the moment with Ben Cheeseman, but let's take a look into the championship standings at large as we head in to the final run of the season. Taking a look then at the pro standings, with Labbe already wrapping up his championship. He finds himself with 456 points, I should say, over Wright's 342. Brooklyn Donkin in third with 308 points, with David Tanguay in fourth with 306. Rounding out the top five, Kyle Jenkins with 281. Jonas Franke with 262 points, with Ben Cheeseman on your screens at the moment, seventh in the pro standings with 233 points. Zalan Such in eighth place with 211 points. Stefan Nicolai in ninth with 146 points, and rounding out the top 10, Raphael Bayer with 102 points. Taking a look into the AM standings on the final round of the championship, Richard Cecil looks poised for the championship title in AM with 405 points. Sergio Belda in second, with Ivan Sanchez in third. In a joint fourth behind them then, Andrew Veldkamp and Cedric Grenier-Massey, both with 258 points to round out that top five. JM Quito behind them, only 6 points away with 252 points. Christophe Dupois in 7th, with Didier Potvin in 8th place with 181 points. In 9th place, we find that of Matthew Badensky, with Let's Race Mate with 179 points, rounding out the top 10. Joey Fisher with 177. And taking a look over towards not only the session regulations that show our return back to the 1x120 format with 2 mandatory pit stops and 30 minutes of qualifying to go along with it for the final round of the championship, we reel over to the Teams Championship to see that Malwa Racing has solidified their position at the head of the table in the Pro Teams Championship over 5-Star and Clutch Kick Motorsports. Meanwhile, it's still down to the wire here, just looking here under 100 points between Holkianos and Malwa Racing's AM division. There is still the chance for them to reel this in, but it would take a disaster from Holkianos to throw them off the top step in the AM Teams Championships. So, of course, taking a look back around then to the regs for today, we're back on the 1x120 format. 30 minutes of qualifying coming up. You join us in the last 10 minutes of what has been a 4-hour free practice session and 2 hours of racing to follow, with 2 mandatory pit stops throughout for today's final round of the championship. And following on board still here with the 114 McLaren of Ben Cheeseman, taking a look into balance of performance listings for tonight. Aston Martin find themselves still with 40 kilos worth of an advantage, so still great news to be heard there for Karina Stinson, still the sole user of the V12 Vantage. The Lexus RCF finds itself in a close second here, only 11 points in difference in terms of weight loss there, 11 kilos I should say, with the RCF losing 29 kilos. They're 9 kilos lighter than the Bentley Continental with 20 kilos. McLaren on the screens at the moment, they're 7th 120S GT3 Evo will lose 11 kilos for the run in towards tonight's race, with 6 kilos apiece then shed away from both Mercedes, Aston Martin's V8 Vantage and the Porsche 911 992 GT3R. Into the positives then, Ferrari gaining 4 kilos with BMW gaining 6. That's the same story for Ford, and peculiarly enough, it'll be Lamborghini at the short end of the stick for possibly the first time in a long old time here, with Huracan 8 kilos heavier than factory curb weight. And so, taking a look onto the wider scale of today's session, we find ourselves only with 15 cars left to go in the championship here. And really, our focal point in tonight's event will be situated on two: Richard Cecil and Sergio Belda. The two frontrunners of the AM Championship are set to wrap up their feuds tonight. These two still within range of one another as it stands, then 31 points apart for the run in towards tonight's event. Now, in order for them to wrap up the championship in the last round, they would have needed a gap of 35 points in the case there of Richard Cecil, who still leads in the AM Drivers' Championship as the last remaining championship to conclude besides the AM teams. This is set to be a rather interesting conclusion to the World Series heading in towards tonight's event. We find us then with 4 minutes of free practice left to go. Whilst we have the opportunity then, let's see if we can go and catch on board with Cedric Grenier-Massey, a driver with Let's Race Mate. And this team has really taken competition in their stride after a late entry into both this and the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series, which, if you didn't hear, this week will be returning on, I believe, the 3rd of June. I'll have to double check that one over the course of the broadcast. But on board here with Cedric Grenier-Massey with BMW for our track tour of the GP Strecker. A fantastic circuit, in my honest opinion, and often overshadowed by the mighty Nordschleife when used in its N24 configuration. We're down through turn 1 here at the Castrol S, sometimes called the Yokohama S if it's used in the N24 layout. Up through to the Mercedes Arena section here. This is what's snipped away in the N24 layout, where we'll find ourselves along the Yokohama S's. Down through to turn 3, looping round to turn 4. Now, good overtaking opportunities are plenty down in this opening section of the track. It's what often does leave us with a little bit of an empty stomach for action in the opening laps of a Nordschleife race, cutting this whole section out through the RTL in towards the Ford curve. Down through turn 7 we go, on board with the number 6 BMW of Cedric Grenier-Massey. Dunlop curve coming down here towards turn 8. Going for a V-shaped line there. Not unheard of. We have seen similar strategies used in Formula 1 in the last 6 years. Down through to the Michael Schumacher S's, or I suppose more relevantly up through the Michael Schumacher S's. In towards Kumo and Bit, sometimes called in its older configuration the Bit and Warsteiner curves. Here through turns 11 and 12. I would say that the GP Strecker stands head and shoulders on the same kind of pedestal as well-balanced tracks like Barcelona and Silverstone. It's a very good place to develop one's understanding of the machine they choose to get behind. If you can't conquer here, you're going to have trouble everywhere else. In through to the Vidal chicane. This is a real kicker through here. Unlike the much sharper NGK chicane, which is used over on Formula 1 in the Eiffel Grand Prix in its last ever use, for the time being at least, of Grand Prix racing, out through the Coca-Cola curve down towards the line then with Cedric Grenier-Massey. And as he crosses the line here, it is to an improvement by looks of things. Across the line he goes, 158.437 for the number 6, 10th fastest as he crosses the line there. Still finds himself straying away from the back end of the top 5 in the AM category. Joey Fisher currently finds himself fastest in free practice. Richard Cecil, possible champion to be tonight, finds himself in division 2nd. Danny Felix in 3rd with Didier Potvin in 4th. And as we saw there for Grenier-Massey, currently in a division 5th. Now, there are rumours of connection troubles there for the pro category. And there have been a few rumours swirling around outstanding connection issues surrounding this event tonight. So we will be keeping things a little bit tight-lipped on whether or not we expect to see the event run through as intended, but we will be quick to react to anything along the way. Now, I believe coming up in the next couple of seconds here will be a manual reset of the server, just so that we get the best possible running chance. That's what's been the running course here for the World Series for the last couple of rounds. So we will hold short on any talks of qualifying right away, though regrettably doesn't seem to be much data to go off of in tonight's round of the championship. So we will be heading into this one for the most part blind. Right now, though, you can see your big 4, as it would be, LeBay, Jenkins, Donkin and Wright. There's also worth the considerations there of Cheeseman, part of that top 5 for the pro category. We'll hold on, though, to the suggestion that there will be a mandatory reset. And yes, we got confirmation just now. So we will be back in just a moment's time and return to you once the session has been reset. So do bear with us. And so we're returning after the reset to find ourselves in changeable conditions for the run in towards qualifying. Now, there had been a few warnings here and there surrounding weather for tonight's round of the championship, but we do find ourselves now facing head-on the risk of rain today. And this could make for a rather curious start to racing. We've seen quite a few wet races over the last couple of weeks here on TRTN, and it has given us quite the theatrics over the course of races short and long. So in a 2-hour race tonight, these drivers will be up against it if these conditions are to persist. We see here for Richard Cecil, back out onto the track he goes. And this has been a long time in the works here for Richard Cecil. Racing driver on and off the screen. Very familiar with his work with Porsche. And tonight could find himself in the cusp of a trophy in the virtual world here. The AM Drivers' Championship on the World Series has been one he's had to fight very hard against, that of both Sergio Belda and Ivan Sanchez of Hokianos Motorsports to contend for over the course of the season at large. Though taking a look back into those AM standings would reveal the recent introduction then of Cedric Grenier-Massey now among that top 5, and as it stands to be the case, level on points with Andrew Veldkamp. As it stands to be the case, both of those two do find themselves numerically out of the fight. We are looking at the course here of a 2-horse race between these two, 31 points in contention between Sergio Belda and Richard Cecil. All he needs to do is grow that margin by 4 points to have it. Albeit, it's the case here where all he necessarily needs to do is win. Well, not even win, actually. That's a bit of a stretch of the imagination. It's a case where he has to just finish tonight's race. So regardless of where he places here, it comes to be a case for that of Sergio Belda. He is going to have to win this on flying colours. Cecil is going to have to disconnect for this to possibly swing in the opposite direction to have, as it stands to be the case, Belda lead by 4 points. But then obviously the consideration comes in over the drop point system, which still has yet to find either of these two drivers claim on a DNF. As we drop in then to the last 2.5 minutes of this extended free practice session. Richard Cecil getting to grips with the wet surface here at the Nurburgring. It's worth noting here for the Porsches, they have demonstrated in multiple championships in the hands of multiple different drivers of multiple different experience levels a great sort of affinity for wet racing. So with a driver very, very uniquely experienced with racing with Porsches, this ought to be a very, very fascinating drive indeed. At that number 5, out through towards the Ford curves we go on the RTL here at the GP Strecker. We're coming up towards the end of this broadcast week as well here on TRTN. And with the end of this championship, we have 2 more championships to wrap up next week. You'll be seeing the season finales for Fatch GT Season 10 and the TRC GT Manufacturers Cup. Heading into Monday and Tuesday next week. If you're joining us tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. BST, you get to see round 2 of the NLRL Sunday League powered by TRTN. In our first ever season as title sponsors, we had a brilliant opening round at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. You'll be joining us tomorrow evening from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the first sprint of the season. The first of the triple sprints, as it were. If you're joining us in a few weeks' time, you'll be able to see the premiere round of Season 4 of the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series by Competizione Performance League. And whilst we still have the opportunity for some news here before we get in towards qualifying today, finding ourselves uniquely positioned to announce this at the request of Race Control. World Series Season 2 will be coming in October 2026. We had confirmation from Race Control a few hours before today's broadcast, but we are able to announce that to you right here and right now. We'll bring this back up over the course of the news segment as well. The Competizione Performance League World Series will return in October. So the summer, that weekend slot is going to start to free up just a little bit for us here on TRTN. We'll be primarily focusing our time with the folks over at HCCL with their upcoming Ginetta Summer Series, and also with the return of the Multi-Class Championship. Of course, we're still in the midst of that, coming up towards its last couple of rounds. As it comes to be the case, we're still in the second half of that season. The World Series will return in October as we head in towards the autumn. For those of you still craving action then from the Competizione Performance League, you will be delighted to know then, as mentioned before, a few weeks from now we'll see the return of GT4 racing as we head into our 4th season of coverage. Just waiting now for the end of this free practice session, extended as it may be as we head in towards 30 minutes of qualifying. Round through turn 16 then. Joey Fisher recently back up into the top 10 on the AM standings. Across the line then in towards qualifying today as wet weather persists. 30 minutes then against the clock here at the Nurburgring. And currently the paddock falls silent, but we see just getting out there looks to be, as it stands looking here, that, yes, Didier Potvin on his way onto the track. But out in front of him, the early bird gets the proverbial worm here. It's the number 5 who we saw just a moment ago, getting in his sighting laps in wet conditions, and now he'll have even more to play up against here as conditions only get worse and worse by the second. Richard Cecil then first out among the fray will be staying on board with the number 5 for the first of our flying laps here in the final qualifying of the season. This is going to be a long time coming for him then. We've seen his struggles down in GT4 with his choice of vehicle. Went around the block a little bit, moved from, I believe it was Alpine to Aston Martin, then over to Porsche, where he seems to have found his footing there. It's here in GT3 where he really has been able to open up in the AM category. Taking a look once again back through the previous wins of the season, you can see that Richard Cecil powerhoused his way through the first 2 races at Silverstone, with Sergio Belda collecting on the 3rd of 3 races in the 3X40 that opened the season out. Then he would return to winning form in round 2. Then we saw the brief rise of Everaldo dos Santos for 2 rounds. Only then in round 5 and 6 would Cecil once again return to winning form. Joey Fisher, Danny Felix and Cedric Grenier-Massey at the Barcelona triple header gave us 3 very unique wins there, with Sergio Belda collecting on round 8's win. Only then when we came to the Hungaroring at round 9's triple header would Cecil once again come back into winning form for the first time since round 6, winning back-to-back in race 1 and 2. It seems then it's written in the stars for this one, but he still has one more go of things in the championship down in the AMS before he gets to call himself champion of the World Series AM Championship. As for Christian Lebay, this one has been long fought for them, but with Zalan Such's waning attendance in the second half of the season, especially after a disappearance for him between rounds 2 and 6, when he would then return to the grid on a win on his return to the series. His on and off appearance thereafter has led to him falling down through the Pro Standings, ultimately giving rise for Lebay's shot at the Pro Standings Championship, of which he claimed on in the Hungaroring last week. We're on board then with Richard Cecil into our first flying laps of today's qualifying session in wet conditions here at the Nurburgring. In through to the Mercedes Arena section. And up over that crest, he's going to have to sort of tiptoe through most of the crests on track, especially with the amount of weight carried over the rear axle. And as Porsche can get very, very fleet of foot up over any changes in elevation. Fortunately, that's among the worst of it covered already. So down through the RTL, in towards the forward curve, down at turn 6 and turn 7. In towards the Dunlop Curve. Up towards the Michael Schumacher S's. Now, in wet conditions, this can be a very dangerous corner indeed. Those curbs can grab very violently on the car and force over rotation out of them. We've seen it before on a limited number of occasions. In towards Bitten Warsteiner. So far, so good for Richard Cecil. Has been playing things very safe here, trying to find his footing around the track. Far wetter conditions than what we saw on the trailing end there of free practice, down through the Hatzenbeck's corner. Into the Vidal chicane. Now, again, equally dangerous in the wet. Already dangerous enough in the dry with those very high kicker curbs on the inside, punishing those who clip too far into the corner. Down through to the Coca-Cola curve. And it opens up here for the opening straight. He's able to put the hammer down on the number 5. Down towards the line then goes Richard Cecil for the first flying lap of today, 207.542. From behind him, the number 59, Joey Fisher, goes fastest by 1.4 seconds, 206.060. From behind them, the number 35, Didier Potvin, to third. Number 6, Cedric Grenier-Massey. Down towards the line he goes. And a time onto the chart there, third fastest. Then from behind him, the 113, Kyle Jenkins of 5-Star Esports, goes fastest, 205.400. Number 54, it's right across the line. It took the third of available victories in last week's round at the Hungaroring triple header. 204.592, the 119 across the line then. Christian Lebay, 8/10 up, 203.770. And of course, Ford a lot lighter than they're used to being in this championship, finding themselves for once not on the short end, but I wouldn't exactly say they're on the end of the stick that's swinging. Down across the line, the number 26 and the number 505. So we got to see there from that of JM Keto. Sadly, no time set, but for the 505, Matthew Bidensky, currently division 5th, 8th overall. Number 39 approaching the line here. So that's for Christophe Dupois. From behind him, the number 91 of Ivan Sanchez. Sadly, no time set there for Dupois. For Sanchez, goes third fastest overall then in the number 91 Holkianos Mustang. Of course, Holkianos firmly on the charge now here in the final round to solidify their position in the AM Championship title for the teams. It has been a very unique angle to explore. The number 17 across the line there, Brooklyn Donkin of Euro Titans Endurance, only 65 thousandths away from Kyle Jenkins in 4th. Many eyes then dart onto this one here, the number 91, as the number 65 approaches the line. Sergio Belda goes third fastest off of Sanchez. So if Holkianos weren't already dead set on their charge towards a team's title down in the AMS, and here is certainly the evidence of that. A second row lockout for these two AMs amongst a grid of pros to their front and rear. And now we see then Joey Fisher makes it Three's Company to round out that top 5. The number 59 now 5th fastest in today's session. As for Richard Cecil, currently hangs back then a division 5th, sorry, I should say. Now division 6th for the introduction of Cedric Grenier-Massey. We've got to see there Kyle Jenkins, now 2nd fastest in today's session. And that does flush Joey Fisher from the top 5, but he still finds himself on that 3rd row, now tucked in alongside Ivan Sanchez. Number 119 across the line, new fastest time then, 203.570 for Christian Lebay, who, as it would appear then, in the absence of Zalan Such once again for this round, and any other competition that has come close to him so far, would appear to be the case. He is hunting down one last victory to wrap out the season here on the World Series. This is going to be for quite some time then Among the last times on the weekend slot that we'll be seeing this driver, he's going to be away for the majority of the summer, he tells us. Off with real-world motorsports. Now to be quite exciting indeed for him. Over on GT4, though, we'll still be seeing the now 3-time GT4 champion in the Pro-Am Cup America Series. And we head in towards Season 4 in a few weeks' time. Down across the line, number 39. Now number 17. Here comes Brooklyn Donkin. Can he return to the top 5? Yes, he can. And we get to see there now the reintroduction. Now making 5 pros on the grid. Ben Cheeseman in the 114 McLaren. Mysterious absentee before the reset. Next across the line, Sergio Belda. Goes up to 4th there. Donkin now to the back end of the top 5. So the opening 10 minutes have given us a very peculiar look of that top 5. Sergio Belda punching well above his weight then for an AM driver. Not only does he find himself up over the cards here of his championship rival Richard Cecil, who now, as we see, moves up towards a division 3rd and 7th overall. But Belda currently finds himself in the land of the Giants, up in that top 5. Ivan Sanchez, by looks of things there, holds that division 2nd. It's Didier Potvin that goes 3rd for a Ford 1-2-3 in the AMs. Richard Cecil 4th. Joey Fisher in 5th. Grenier Massey from 6th stays there for the time being. JM Keto division 7th. Badensky division 8th. Feldkamp division 9th. Danny Felix in a 10th with no time set. And division 11th for Christophe Dupois. Currently division 5th but 16th overall. Ben Cheeseman with no time set. But he has 20 minutes between now and the end of qualifying. So still plenty of time on the cards. Number 54 then right on his way out. As we saw then from the Lexus. A triumphant performance in the Hungaroring. At the 3rd of 3 races there, after back-to-back victories for LeBay, it was Wright who collected on yet another under his belt for this season's run of wins. Of course, took his first win in Watkins Glen earlier this season, leveraging a very unique strategy that ultimately ended up being taken away the next race thereafter when new regulations came in to force drivers into the pits between the first 15... after the first 15 minutes and before the last 15 minutes, which is, I would say, slap bang right where Wright was able to leverage such a unique strategy, one that was certainly quite the gambler's pick. As we see here, drifting down through turn 6, now towards turn 7. That Lexus still rather squirrely over its back end. Of course, the oldest design on the grid at the moment in the absence of Karina Stinson's 2013 Aston Martin. It's the 2015 Lexus RCF, the oldest on the block. A currently 11-year-old design, due replacement according to Toyota and Lexus. Really, this has been the epitome of if it's not broke, don't fix it. And the Lexus has been the trusty weapon of choice for many drivers throughout both this season and multiple seasons we've covered here on TRTN. I mean, you take a look here, Wright is one notable example in this championship. Zalan Such, yet another notable example up in the pro standings for the World Series. But taking a look over towards, say, for example, the NLRL Sunday League, of which we have currently a lot of history backing. Take a look back to Season 2. Jason Bush was able to deliver Lexus to a championship, being the first ever driver to win with Lexus in Kyalami. Later went on to take Season 2's championship. That was really quite something to behold then. We see, though, for Wright, it's continued troubles here with the RCF, just off of the Vidal chicane. Number 54, nearly beached there on the run down towards the pit lane. Didier Potvin now stands overall 4th place at the head now of the AM division over Fisher and Belda, with Sanchez 4th, Cecil in 5th. Right now, Richard Cecil very much so aware of the fact that all he need do here is finish this race among that top 5 ideally, knowing that Sergio Belda has got the world's weight resting on his shoulders to try and outrun the number 5 on the standings. As we get closer to the halfway mark then of the last qualifying session of the season, currently stands then only one driver within half a second of the fastest time, which is a new fastest time, I should clarify, a 2:02.827 by LeBay, and that's Kyle Jenkins of 5-Star Esports in 2nd. Wright makes the second and last driver then to be involved in a sub-second gap between himself and LeBay. Currently then 3 drivers at the head of the field, front to back by less than a second. We see, though, for Wright, his issues are only continuing to persist here. Still by looks of things, possibly trying out a few alternative setups to try and squeeze a few tenths more worth of performance out of the 54 Lexus. Now, there is still a pro driver we're awaiting to see then onto the timing charts, and that's the 114 McLaren of Ben Cheeseman. Formerly a driver then with Lamborghini. His recent move over towards McLaren has been a curious one indeed. On the run in towards today's race, we'll see what he can make of things here. Of course, this was not a completely arbitrary decision by the Brit on his run away from Lamborghini. As we've seen, as with many Lamborghini drivers over the course of multiple championships here on TRTN, stability has been at the forefront of their concerns. And while the McLaren, I would say, is no Bentley nor Ford in terms of its stability, it certainly can give a lot more manageable control compared to the very snappy and sharp around the edges Lamborghini. So perhaps this is a benefit rather than a hindrance for Cheeseman, but it is going to take a few races here for him to bed back in with the McLaren. 16.5 minutes left to go. Then LeBay back into the pit lane. Kyle Jenkins really on the move here now, putting himself 75 thousandths away from pole position. Getting closer and closer here. Jenkins in a real flow state down through to the Ford curve. As for the Lexus, closing in by looks of things here, but Wright continues to wrestle with his Lexus for the time being. Sanchez now fastest among the AMs as he crosses the line there a moment ago. As it stands to be the case, a 2:03.792 by the number 91 puts him the fastest among the AM drivers, ahead of Didier Potvin in second and Joey Fisher in third. Sergio Belda fourth, Richard Cecil in and amongst the top five, and that's all he needs to do for the time being. Anything else is of his own volition. We see for Ben Cheeseman, now onto the timing charts in an overall 7th. Finds himself one of 2 Pro Division drivers in this qualifying session so far to be washed away from the main top 3 pack. The other being Brooklyn Donkin, currently residing now at the back of the top 10. As it stands to be the case here, only by having a glance 5 thousandths of a second from Richard Cecil in 9th. Number 5 across the line there, and a recent leap for Richard Cecil. Now sees him from 9th overall to 6th overall, and in division he's on the podium once again, second row actually, as it would happen to be the case, as he finds himself in 3rd. 113 across the line, and Kyle Jenkins now emerges at pole position here. This is a very, very curious turn of events for the Ferrari and for 5-Star Esports, as wet conditions only look to get worse in the next 10 minutes. LeBay's back out in response in the Maloir Racing number 119, but it's the 113 now at the head of the table here by 4 tenths of a second. 202.350 from the number 113 of Kyle Jenkins, now fastest here at the Nurburgring for qualifying for round 10 of the World Series. Making their way out of the pits that we just saw in the foreground, Danny Felix in the 985. Right behind him looks to be, I believe that is the number 26 there. Yes, JM Quito of Holkianos Motorsports. Number 505 and number 65 across the line. We'll see here from the trailing of 2, Sergio Belda from Division 5th stays there. As it comes to be the case, Ben Cheeseman only a single 100th in front with McLaren. Number 59 nearest. So here comes Joey Fisher. You consider then earlier this season for Fisher as he crosses the line there to stay in 4th place. Earlier this season, changeable conditions and a frantic environment in the AMS gave him the opportunity at round 7 to claim on his first ever AM division victory over at the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya. This could prove to be a unique one today here for Joey Fisher, as he still finds himself, as it happens to be the case here among the AMs, that top 4 compressed in by less than half a second front to back. We also get to see now, and we glanced over this, not intentionally of course, but we did just take note now. Ben Cheeseman in his last lap now puts himself within 2 tenths, so it's a 5-star 1-2 here with 13 minutes left to go. LeBay is of course still lapping the track, now on to flying laps once again as he exits the Mercedes arena onto the RTL. But this is a surprising turnaround for 5-star, with Cheeseman still regaining his footing with McLaren, and Jenkins on an absolute knockout run of things so far. They stand 1 and 2 between the 113 and the 114. But what can the 119 do here? That's what we're about to find out here from Christian Lebay. He's down towards the Dunlop Curve. We'll catch him towards the end of his lap. The 985, Danny Felix approaches the line here. Sadly, to no leap of position. We see for JM Keto, same story. From behind them, the 54 of Wright across the line and goes fastest with Lexus by 0.2 of a second. So Jenkins dethroned off of that fastest time. The 505 of Matthew Badensky now goes to looking there, I believe, Division 6th at this time. Number 65 of Sergio Belda stays where he is. The number 113 across the line. Kyle Jenkins could not find the grounds to find his way back up to the head of the field. As a new pole sitter emerges then, right in the number 54. Whom of which, and just having a glance back into our notes from race control, will be among a few drivers we aim to interview by the end of today's race. Now, sadly, we weren't given any word on if we'll be able to speak with Christian Lebay again. Of course, we spoke with him earlier this week after concluding Season 3 of the GT4 Pro-Am Cup. And I imagine this time around he might be a little too shy this time to come back onto the microphone after only a few days ago being back on the interviews, as Lebay now emerges at the head of the field once again. Right now, though, we aim to get interviews out of whoever claims on that AM Drivers' Championship. So either that of Sergio Belda or Richard Cecil, depending on who takes the championship home. We also have scheduled interviews with that of Wright and Cedric Grenier-Massey. In those interviews, then, we'll be able to speak with Wright about trials and tribulations with Lexus, as he has been an up-and-coming driver in this season. Of course, we have seen his proficiencies before. This season has given him a very good showcase with that number 54 Lexus. We'll also be speaking with Cedric Grenier-Massey as part of the Let's Racemate team to speak about their recent come-up in through both championships here on the Competizione Performance League. And, of course, we'll be speaking with whoever is crowned the AM champion. Right now, then, Richard Cecil is back up among the top three, now second over Sanchez and Potvin, with Belda now rounding out the division top 5. Danny Felix goes division 3rd for BMW. JM Keto strikes back then to a 3rd place. Right now emerges fastest over Lebay by 0.4 of a second. And it may be a case here when speaking with Wright, this may not be, strictly speaking, just on a reflection over the course of the season. It could be. It could be sweetened by the talks of a possible race win tonight, because this is looking at very solid form demonstrated now among that top 5 that are much, much closer to each other in the closing 10 minutes than they were by a long shot in the opening 10 minutes, as Lebay now second. Brooklyn Donkin of Euro Titans Endurance now finds himself 3rd over both of the 5-star cars of Jenkins and Cheeseman. Nearest to the line right now is Christian Lebay, so going back on board with this season's Pro Division champion. The 119 Ford down towards the line. Can he reclaim on that fastest lap? Across the line he goes. Needed 0.4, only found there the scope of, I think that's 53 thousandths worth of an improvement. So from behind him, the 114 across the line, Ben Cheeseman stays 5th. From behind him, the number 39. So we'll see here for Christophe Dupois from overall 16th place across the line stays there also. Number 6, Cedric Grenier-Massey. From 14th, goes fastest among the AMs, and that is certainly quite a leap there. Was looking towards the back end of the AM grid, and as it happens to be the case here, now finds himself leading by having a look there. I want to say that's about 58 thousandths we're talking between himself and Sergio Belda, who I should point out very recently also took pole position. Really, I'd say this is still quite a who's who here on both fronts, Pro and AM, over who could claim on that pole position across both divisions in tonight's round. With 8.5 minutes just under left to go here in the Nurburgring and conditions still on the fritz, we do find ourselves presented with a bit of an old Western gunslinger draw between these drivers. But who dare emerge then as the fastest hand in the West? Lebay currently down through to the Dunlop Curve. Number 65, though, next across the line. Can Belda reclaim on pole position? Yes, he can. Across the line then for the AMs. Goes into an overall 6th, but at the head of the AM field. Number 113 nearest. So here comes Kyle Jenkins. Jenkins there stays in a reluctant P4. Richard Cecil out through the Coca-Cola curve. Currently Division 4th, and across the line he goes. And as it stands to be the case there, stays Division 4th on this last lap just gone. Number 985 down through Hatzenbeck. It's the number 985 here, the BMW of Danny Felix, who, bringing back up the previous wins over the course of this season, was able to claim on a singular race win. But much like we saw there for Wright, trouble off of the Vidal chicane is going to thwart any opportunities for an improvement on this lap. Number 39 behind him then we saw from Christophe Dupois. Number 119, trouble for LeBay out through Vidal as well. And this could be a real crunch zone here on the run in towards the race today, especially on those first few laps for both categories. LeBay then stays in second, number 6 across the line. Cedric Grenier-Massé couldn't return a volley lap for lap there with Sergio Belda. Stays in behind him, number 54 across the line. And Wright, as it stands to be the case, then holds on to a new fastest lap, 201.465 for the number 54 Lexus. And behind him, the 113 Kyle Jenkins finds himself still without a line here into that top 3. Still 4th in the session, the 114 down to the line. So here comes Ben Cheeseman. Stands to be the case, though. Again, sadly, no time found there. Number 26 across the line. JM Quito stays Division 5th. Number 17, here comes Brooklyn Donkin from 3rd. Stays 3rd. And from behind him, the number, I believe they're 59, Joey Fisher, 3rd also in the AMS. You see multiple instances then of invalidations in today's session. Number 35, Didier Potvin to the line. Right now, with the 2 highest scoring MRTs down in the AM category, currently being outclassed by both of the top scoring Holkianos cars, they do find themselves here in a very, very tough situation. The writing is on the wall for Maloir Racing's endeavours down in the AM Championship. Of course, up in the pros, they've got this by a clean sweep with LeBay, its drivers champion, and Maloir Racing looking to secure the team's championship in pro, up and away from 5-Star Esports and Clutch Kick Motorsports. Back into the pit lane goes Didier Potvin, the 39 nearest. So Dupois down through to the Vidal chicane. And it's going to be a consistently tough section on these drivers throughout today's race. As we drop into the last 5 minutes of qualifying. Out wide, though, we just see there at the Coca-Cola curve for Dupois. So the chances right now of an improvement up past 15th. I was about to say remains slim, but he has managed to find it there. And this could be more emblematic of further issues here for Andrew Veldkamp, who was, for some time in this championship, a serious contender at the forefront of the AMS. Right now, though, as we enter our final round of the championship, he finds himself plumb last. With 4.5 minutes left to go. Wright still fastest, 201.425. 113 across the line there. Jenkins stays where he is. Cheeseman on his way to the line. Needs to find about 2 tenths there over Jenkins to move into 4th place, and across the line he goes, and as it stands to be the case then, stays in 5th place. 4 minutes left to go. Number 505 across the line a moment ago. Matthew Bedensky, as it stands to be the case there, stands in Division 9th. Number 17 across the line a moment ago. Brooklyn Donkin still 3rd in today's session. Number 59, Joey Fisher, same story down in the AMS. Still 3rd for Ferrari. 616 is nearest, so back on with Veldkamp. A real series of highs and lows here for Ford in today's round, where they still stand towards that front row here in qualifying. And currently, as it stands to be the case, then fastest in the AMS, with Sergio Belda back on form in the number 65. Elsewhere, it's continued struggles from south of the top 5 down in the AMS. Across the line then, Veldkamp still remains in an outright 16th, number 35 nearest, Didier Potvin. Across the line then, Potvin from 13th, stays there for the time being. 119 is nearest, so looking back in here with Christian LeBay. Down through to the line, he pulls over, so against the original expectations, we could have possibly seen an improvement there. LeBay slows down on the opening straight. And I believe what we're seeing here is either moving over for this huge pack of drivers behind him, or he's been, by looks of things out, and I was going to suggest it originally, but I was going to say he might actually be practicing the race start. That's quite clever then for him to do his homework here. He's already scoping up the track surface as it would be for the run down towards turn 1. A very hectic area, even in the drier conditions here at the Nurburgring. And already trying to put some of the footwork in there just to make sure he's got that one nailed down to a fine art. If he can't have the greatest of starts, he wants to have one of the most reliable of starts. Now back on board here, number 91, Ivan Sanchez. His teammate, Sergio Belda, stands currently at the head of the AM field, rounding out that top 5. Another teammate of his, JM Quito, over at Holkianos Motorsports. From behind him, the 113, Kyle Jenkins, currently 4th in the session, as we do head in now to the point of no return. Right now, the 3 fastest drivers in Pro remain in the pit lane. Jenkins is still out here in worsening conditions at the Nürburgring. The number 6 of Cedric Grenier-Massey has his chances of a possible charge to pole position in the AMS sundered on the last available lap for him as he's back into the pit lane. We'll be speaking with him later on to discuss his and Let's Race Mates' progression throughout what has been a late start for them across 2 championships here on the Competizione Performance League. The 616 across the line, and Andrew Veldkamp onto one more lap here in the GP Strecker. Number 35 nearest. Right now, conditions only getting worse and worse, so unlikely to be the case on the run into these last couple of laps for these drivers that will be seeing anything constituting a significant leap through the order. Potvin across the line. And as expected there, in line with our current theory, and what we're seeing abundantly clear to us on track here is conditions have gotten far worse than they were 30 minutes ago at the start of qualifying. We see Sanchez back into the pit lane. Following him is the 113, Kyle Jenkins. So the top 5 looks to remain frozen in place there with Ben Cheeseman back in. So that's all the pro drivers back into the pit lane. And among the last ones on the track here is Badensky in the 505, still soldiering things out here in a worsening Nürburgring. Out through the Vidal chicane. Does he come into the pit lane? No, he's going to stay out. He's going to try and run this the full 9 yards. Currently from where he stands in a Division 9th place, nearest driver to him is about 8 tenths away, that being Didier Potvin in an outright 13th. Badensky rounds out the session Division 9th as one of the final drivers to cross the line here in quali. We do yet find ourselves, though, currently without an official end of qualifying. But as it seems to be the case here, your 2 pole sitters right in the number 54 Lexus, and as it comes to be the case here, Belda in the number 65 Mustang in the AM category. This grid is shaping up to be a very lively one then. The drivers still committed to the championship all the way through 10 rounds of competition. As the session wraps up, then you get official confirmation right on pole in Pro, Belda on pole in AM. As we reel away from qualifying, and to reiterate then as we get in towards the news segment, that of course the World Series will be returning in October of 2026. We do round out, however, in just a moment, though, we do have very breaking news, actually, as it happens to be the case, that George Russell has won the Canada Grand Prix Sprint over on Formula One. We do, though, wrap out today's news segment on the run-in towards the final grid of the season with a very regrettable form of news. And it has been, of course, most of you may have seen, in the last 48 hours, we sadly lost one of the greats here in the world of motorsport. Kyle Busch sadly passed away 48 hours ago, aged 41. As of yet, no official reason has been submitted, but he was hospitalized earlier that day. He leaves behind then 2 championship titles in NASCAR, a legacy of support for fans, a legacy of good deeds, and a legion of undying fans. It has been a truly sad week here in motorsports, that we must sadly say goodbye to a driver so influential in NASCAR's history. Our thoughts then are with the Busch family at this time. Away from our news segment then into the final round of the Competizione Performance League World Series, taking a look onto the session regulations. We've come out of 30 minutes of qualifying, and coming up next then 120 minutes of racing here at the Nurburgring. 2 mandatory pit stops to go alongside it then for these drivers, so we will be looking at stints roughly in the range of about 40 minutes apiece. Of course, the pit window, I believe, is back in force for this round of the championship, and that would, I believe, entice the first 15 minutes out of the equation and the last 15 minutes also out of the equation here for this round. Weather radar currently holds it wet to start, as you can see here, sopping wet with rain here at the Nurburgring, and it's only going to get worse in the first 30 minutes of racing. 5 minutes then before the start of the final round to the Competizione Performance League World Series powered by Malwa Transport. We find ourselves with 2 unique pole sitters then. Sergio Belda on pole in the AMs and Wright on pole in the Pros. Taking a look then through the full order of things. Starting from the back of the field then with our cameras at the moment, Andrew Velkamp starts 16th with Christophe Dupois in 15th, Vidensky in 14th and Potvin in 13th, Sanchez in 12th and Danny Felix starts in 11th. We see JM Keto now coming up on the right-hand side there. The number 26 starts in 10th with Richard Cecil in 9th. Now we start breaching up in that top 3 for the AM drivers here, as we find Joey Fisher starts in 8th and an overall 3rd, Cedric Grenier-Massey in 7th and an overall 2nd, and it's Sergio Belda on pole position, starting from an overall 6th place. Into the top 5 overall in the session, and we find ourselves now facing down only 5 pro drivers heading in towards this final round, with their season having wrapped up in the Hungaroring last week. And it stands to be the case then. The 114 Ben Cheeseman starts alongside Kyle Jenkins, 5th and 4th, as it comes to be the case they're bridging over from the 2nd row into the 3rd. Brooklyn Donkin then starts in 3rd place in the number 17 BMW, and at the front of the field, Christian Lebay, the driver's champion in Pro, starts side by side with multiple-time race winner the number 54 Lexus of Wright on pole in Pro, who's already made his, I'd say joys and confidences very clear in our chat at the moment. Very big fan of wet racing, this one. We've seen so far, it's been a lively performance from him. He's had a few bumps and scratches here and there, getting used to the Lexus in these torrential conditions here at the Nurburgring, but it ought to be a very lively drive on the bookings here for the American talent, who starts first among the fray, going toe-to-toe then with Lebay down in towards turn 1. A battle of the V8s on that front row of the grid. And taking a look then from what is technically the 3rd into 4th rows of the overall grid, when we take a look into the AMs, we find Sergio Belda also driving some V8 Thunder there. And the 7th generation Ford Mustang number 65 will go toe-to-toe with an inline 6 turbo, courtesy of Let's Race mates Cedric Grenier-Massey. So 2 minutes before the start of the final round of the championship. Major overtaking spots to discuss then start right off at turn 1. A very odd-shaped open hairpin right. I'd say, actually, no, that's a bit of a lie there. It's less of an open hairpin, more of a very sharp hairpin, especially going for that inside where there is a significant drop on the apex of the corner down through the Castrol S. Up through the Mercedes Arena section is where you'll find plenty more opportunities emerging as early as turn 3, though it would take mistakes to bring overtakes at turn 2 into equation on the opening couple of laps. Out through turn 4 into turn 5, a good exit onto the RTL can give drivers an opportunity to go side by side into turn 6 and 7 at the Ford curve. Then later down at the Dunlop curve at turn 8, much like we see with another hairpin style corner. Funnily enough, the Spoon corner over at Suzuka does present itself a fairly unique challenge for these drivers, as we will see plenty of unorthodox lines carried down in towards Dunlop Kera. Up through the Michael Schumacher S's, then in towards Bitten Warsteiner, another dual set of overtaking opportunities, especially into turn 11 a bit, also sometimes called the Kumo curve. Then down through Hatzenbecks, through Vidal, it will be the Coca-Cola curve to give us our next advantage for a possible overtaking opportunity. One last go of things here in the World Series, and the series will return to you after the summertime in October of 2026. And in a few weeks' time, we'll be going back in with racing here on the Competizione Performance League from the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series that enters its 4th consecutive season on the run now, with no interruptions. 5 pros then, as it happens to be the case, and looking at the grid thereafter, find ourselves in the company of looking here 11 AMs as we get the 30-second warning. Now on board with Wright in the number 54, head of the field then in the pros. The run in towards the final round of the championship, on board with the 54 as we go away in towards the formation lap. Rain pattering against the windscreen there just before we pull away with the Lexus. The rest of the grid formed up behind him. You can see just under his rear wing there peers in the BMW of Brooklyn Donkin, starting on that second row alongside Kyle Jenkins. As pulling away from the grid goes Wright. Now, this is going to be a major consideration for the drivers today. Not only the incredibly slippery conditions for the run in towards the first couple of laps until a proper dry line can be bed in, it's also going to be that tremendous amount of tail end spray. And to demonstrate my point, we go on board with Sergio Belder, who right now stands in an overall 6th place start, but at the head of the AM field. You can see that top 5 of the pros up in front almost completely obscured by the amount of spray generated from 1st down to 5th. The only car we can clearly make out before we get into that corner is the one right at the very front of it, that being the 54 Lexus. Then you get a glance thereafter of the 119 in 2nd place, but the rest of that field, it's rather dangerous to be the case here for these drivers. They may have to find themselves, you can see right there. Now, albeit there are no collisions on the formation lap, but imagine that being an incident further up ahead. Belton wouldn't have particularly much time to react, if any at all. And then you can't bank on what's going on from behind him with Cedric Grenier-Massey and Joey Fisher. So there is the possibility for a pile-up amongst the middle grounds of this grid today, especially on that transition from Pro into AM, out past the top 5, because of the lack of visibility and lack of available grip for these drivers for the run into the first couple of laps, I should say, of this round. In towards Dunlop then. And this can be a bit of a dangerous one on the drivers. Now, we compared it to Spoon, and that's because its overtaking opportunities do require an unorthodox line of things. It is very banked in the middle, and that can catch you out, as we've seen at very similar banked corners. As a matter of fact, in the opposite direction would have been over at the Circuit Zandvoort with the Hugenholtz box at turn 3. In wet conditions, that can easily grab you if you go too far on the inside and start riding the curb, as that will quickly swing the car around and leave you stranded, which is the last thing you'll want, with the rest of the grid barreling up behind you, such as the case here of the 54, who had a few stability concerns with the Lexus over the course of free practice, and now in towards a wet qualifying today, in towards wet racing. He's already demonstrated his confidence towards wet racing and his affinity for it. Looking forward to tonight's round, in his words. And out through the run of things here at Warsteiner. It's a real who's who here for the top-end speed. I mean, that top 3 is beset by some of the fastest cars in GT3. The Lexus RCF, the 7th Gen Mustang, and the BMW M4, all very prominent juggernauts for straight-line speed here on Assetto Corsa Competizione. So tonight should be a very exciting start amongst these 3. Wright, LeBay, and Donkin. But don't count out the rest of that top 5, nor count out the front-running field over on the AMs. When we take a look there, just a few rows down, to see Sergio Belder at the head of the field, looking to try his dearest here to form a gap onto Richard Cecil, but really it's a case where he's got to try and make up, looking here, I think it's about 32 points in one round, so all of that to follow in due course. Making our way down through to the Coca-Cola curve. Here we find ourselves then down towards the line, 16 cars in all, and we are green and racing here for the final round of the World Series on an incredibly abrupt start here at the Nurburgring, one that has already caught drivers out on the race start. We see there right off the bat for Wright, a brilliant getaway from LeBay, who is now swamped in with Donkin up to 2nd. We see right here from the front row of the AMS, side by side between Sergio Belder and Joey Fisher. Fisher gets turned around on the run down through the Castrol S for the first time. Not that we can make out much of an image there. Seeing here from Cedric Grenier-Massey's point of view, who, as it stands to be the case in amongst the action here, now gets up to the head of the AM field, actually stands up over Kyle Jenkins. And Sergio Belder now looks to be intercepted by JM Quito. Cedric Grenier-Massey gets away into that top 5. Meanwhile, looking back up at the front of the field here for the Lexus, number 54 of Wright, who now leads over Donkin. It's Ben Cheeseman to have a formidable start with McLaren, now finding himself third right off the bat then in the 114, down through to the Dunlop Kera. And this has already proven to be a very lively start indeed. And you can see right off the bat from Brooklyn Donkin, not only was it a formidable start into turn 1, but trailing out here from turn 8 up towards turns 9 and 10 as we rise up through the Michael Schumacher S's. He is hot on the trail to that 54, adamant for his shot at a victory here in the World Series. Great start then from that now assuming top 3. With LeBay lagging behind a little bit there off the start. We see Cedric Grenier-Massey having a great start indeed, threading through the madness of things in Sector 1 to find himself standing at the head of the field in the AMs and actually standing up over one of the pro drivers, that being Kyle Jenkins. Sergio Belda now second, J.M. Quito in third, right behind them Richard Cecil in fourth, Danny Felix in a Division 5th, Sanchez in Division 6th, Podensky Division 7th, Potvin Division 8th, Veldkamp Division 9th, and Dupois in Division 10th. It's Joey Fisher, a reluctant P11 in the AMs after being turned around at turn 1 at the Castrol S's. Looking up then through this field to find themselves packed in like sardines over that front row. Brooklyn Donkin off of that first lap takes the fastest run of things there in the number 17 BMW. This could be a curious one to watch here, going to catch on board if we can with the BMW in hot pursuit of the lead of this race. Brooklyn Donkin, like many Euro Titans drivers, have quite the affinity for wet racing. We've seen that this has been an almost universal trait of the group. So this is going to be a rather interesting one to spot here from Donkin. Watching on from the number 17's point of view as we go barreling down the RTL, just out of the Mercedes Arena section on board here with the 17. Out behind him, Cheeseman losing ground. LeBay still in pursuit out behind him. Cedric Grenier-Massey also losing ground as it stands there away from Kyle Jenkins. We see from the 505 of Podensky, we see here with Danny Felix now looking to try his chances on Richard Cecil, who was in turn looking at a shot on J.M. Quito up in front of him. It's the number 6 we go on board with here to see this current fight for an outright 5th place between two separate divisions. Cedric Grenier-Massey versus Kyle Jenkins down through the Dunlop Kera. Going back up then to see things from the 17's eyes. Up through the Schumacher S's. In towards Bitten Warsteiner. The Lexus with a formidable getaway, but the BMW isn't looking to find himself too distant for too long. Into Warsteiner. Tremendously wet conditions then right off the start of today's race. And right now we find ourselves with plenty of battles to pick from. One of the closest among them we can see here is currently ongoing for 5th place. Cedric Grenier-Massey of Let's Race Mate down in the AM division, fighting with Kyle Jenkins in the Pro division over at 5 Star Esports. We see behind them, not too far away then, is Sergio Belda. Further down the line we get to see here Richard Cecil, as it comes to be the case, sizing his luck over J.M. Quito. Right behind him though, Danny Felix. Also a race winner in this season, was part of that hectic triple header in Barcelona a few weeks ago. We see then for Richard Cecil, this is his opportunity, first among many possibly here, to get back up into the podiums on his charge towards an AM Drivers' Championship title. Ivan Sanchez, we see in the background, is gaining distance here on Danny Felix. We see down through to turn 1. Cecil back onto the racing line. J.M. Quito runs out wide off of the Castrol. Number 5 still chasing along with Danny Felix, runs wide there at turn 2. That could open doors up for the number 91. The number 5 hell-bent on his pursuits of a podium here in the opening laps of round 10. Meanwhile, up front, we see an emerging fight here. Ben Cheeseman versus Christian LeBay for a podium in the pros. Up front as well, we also see the emerging fight for the lead between Wright and Donkin. Lexus versus BMW for the race lead. Richard Cecil back on board then with the possible Drivers' Champion to be down in the AM category tonight. A little bit of front lock-up for him there, so really running the ragged edge on that Porsche. A machine he knows intrinsically. Meanwhile, we see trouble here for Cedric Grenier-Massey as he falls in now behind the number 35 after an incident down at the Ford curves. A huge fall off there for the number 6. We'll be curious to find out what happened for him. Making our way up through the Schumacher S's. We see there separation in line between Quito and Cecil heading up towards Bitten Warsteiner. The Mustang still holds ground over the Porsche. Maneuverability versus power. That's really what we're seeing here between Porsche and Ford out through Warsteiner. And it's that kind of commitment in his drive that's been able to keep him so close. Right now, it does put Richard Cecil now into a podium, so he'll be fighting for second, as it would appear, after the recent dismays for Cedric Grenier-Massey. Possibly, and this is only really by proximity that we're making this claim, possibly involved in some kind of incident there with the 113. I won't say for certain, but that would be the first assumption, considering those two went down into the Ford curves. The 113 was in pursuit, and now suddenly the number 6 is down several positions. If he's took himself out, that's fair enough. Right now, we're just piecing information together based off an absence of it, and we're not about to go into the replays to find out, because the last time we did that, the game crashed almost immediately. Down into turn 1, here at the Castrol S. Cecil still in pursuit. Danny Felix has been able to cling on tightly here to 4th place now, over Ivan Sanchez, who rounds out that top 5. In terms of our closest fights, this is among them then. Cecil v Quito. Up in front, though, Labe v Cheeseman certainly worth a mention here. Down through the RTL in towards turn 6 and 7. Up in front, Donkin still getting close, and it's through this first sector where he's able to put in a lot of that distance onto the 54. It's out through sectors 2 and 3, where Wright has much more of an advantage in that Lexus. We'll go to catch on board, though, with Richard Cecil here. Just cutting away from Donkin to go and locate the number 5. We do get to see here, just quickly, Joey Fisher, not Joey Fisher, Andrew Veldkamp tried to go up and around the outside of Christophe Dupois. Back on board then with Richard Cecil. Up through the Schumacher S's. You can see, though, from the Porsche, it gets a little bit squirrely for the run in. There's a lot of standing water on the edges of that track. He's done very well to avoid them, but he has forced himself right into the iron sights here of Danny Felix, who tries to go for a much more aggressive line on through. You see running deep there behind was Ivan Sanchez. Watching here from the Porsche. BMW has a lot of credence that carries with them here into the Nurburgring. They are Nurburgring royalty after all. But they are going toe-to-toe with, I would say quite respectively, is also Nürburgring royalty. When we take a look to the main series that presides over the Nürburgring using its combined layout, the N24 has been won the most amount of times by BMW, 21 wins with the most recent one in 2025. Porsche stand in a definitive second with 13 total wins at the N24 with their last win in 2021. Two juggernaut brands then here at the Nürburgring go head-to-head for the last of those podiums. BMW versus Porsche. Going back up to the front of the field then to see current action here from the pros as an emerging fight comes up here for Cheeseman v LeBay. Up in front, things are starting to get a little bit of a stalemate forming now between the 17 and the 54. Much more action to be anticipated then from the 119 and the 114, but that's not to take away from the action going on down here in the AMS for that podium. Sergio Belda leads over JM Quito. Right now, Richard Cecil defending away 3rd place in his efforts to regain ground to JM Quito after a slip up down at the Schumacher S's. We see another little bit of a slip there off the Ford curve. The BMW does have the chance here, so we will stay on board just for a little while longer to see what goes on between them in towards the Dunlop Kera. In behind, Ivan Sanchez closing in on Danny Felix there. Tries to get himself on the inside off of turn 8, but loses a lot of steam on the run up through the Schumacher S's. We see for Richard Cecil, the car just skates a little bit there. A lot of understeer for the run in towards turns 9 and 10. But he's had a much better exit of things this time around than he did in his last couple of goes. Now finding himself a further distance up from Danny Felix, who hammers the brakes in towards Bitten Warsteiner to regain some of that lost ground. Rare is it to see anyone go more aggressively onto the brakes and not be behind the wheel of the 992 Porsche. But colour me impressed so far in what has been incredibly close melee for that control of the last of the AM podium positions. Heading up towards Vidal. Danny Felix surely couldn't have thought that he could have made a move up through the Vidal chicane there, but he'd certainly put himself on that possibility. But he, oh, in the background there, that's trouble. That's Badensky. I believe, yes. Yes, that is the number 505. Yellow flags out for Matthew Badensky. We saw the start of that incident, but I think it was out through Vidal. Back end came light, and he's pivoted in hard, as it comes to be the case there. Now in towards turn 16. Back up into green flag conditions then. After the first 10 minutes of racing then, here in the Nurburgring. Wright leads over Donkin. LeBay now up to third. Schiessman still along with him here, making their way down towards the forward curve. So whilst we were seeing there that incident for the 505, it was a case where the 119 was able to spring a move here on the 114. Now fourth. Kyle Jenkins in fifth at the moment. Sergio Belda leads the AMS here in today's race after 10 minutes. JM Quito in behind in second at Holkianos 1-2. This is certainly their path to glory in the team's championship, paved on a golden road for these two at the moment. Richard Cecil hangs on to the podium, still well within a shot then, and still holds the majority of the cards at the table here in the Drivers' Championship over at the AMS. Danny Felix in fourth, runs deep though into Dunlop. That could open doors up here for Ivan Sanchez, currently fearful off the exit there. Contact between the pair of them into the wall goes Danny Felix, and it started off small there between those two. As we do, I believe, have more of an incident to cover up through the Schumacher S's. Yes, the 91, I believe, was collected in an incident just then. And I think it was coming up here. No, I'm not 100% sure on that one. Might have to double check with that. We did get to see what was a very close scope. It was an incident with a 26. Oh, we've just got an information to light there. So as we saw, and it's going to be a bit of an odd one here. We actually have to go back onto another incident entirely. This was between the 91 and the 985. It was right on the trailing end of this clip where we saw the emergence of an incident. We saw just how close they were, but we didn't see what happened next. Right here between Richard Cecil and the number 26 of JM Quito. Now into the pit lane as well goes Danny Felix, as an influx of AM drivers make their way in after Bedlam in the middle sector. Danny Felix into the pit. You can see the state of the front end on that BMW, but we caught the trailing end, in the trailing end, I should say, of that incident between the 91 and the 985. We saw an incident emerge for the 5 and the 26 up through the Schumacher S. As you can see, coming off much less scathed than the 26 is the number 5 of Richard Cecil, now second in division. LeBay currently 8 tenths and closing on Brooklyn Donkin. You can see right now only about 2-3 car lengths between these two, as now 2 seconds emerges between Wright and Donkin at the head of the field. Looking in here with Brooklyn Donkin. Next in the iron sights on Christian LeBay. You can see him in the rear view mirror. But when we cut to the external cameras, that's when the game will actually start rendering spray. You can see a lot less of him, but we do just, I believe, briefly capture there off the exit of the Schumacher S's with a bit of a step out for him. In towards Bitten Warsteiner, collecting some of that pockets of standing water on the sides of the road here. LeBay struggling to wrestle that Mustang back into form, loses 1.6 seconds off of Brooklyn Donkin, who now finds himself stuck in an awkward stalemate here on the podium after the first quarter hour of racing, with 2 drivers already in the pit lane with Danny Felix and JM Quito. It's a troublesome sight as they actually both come into the pits before that has an opportunity to play in for their strategy. So if they just held on 1 lap longer, they would have found themselves, as we'll find in about 30 seconds time here, with the pit window officially open. That has been a reluctant struggle for the 26 and the 985. They find themselves now several, I would say several laps down by the end of this race, as they've now missed the mark by about a minute there. Wright leads, as you'll see in a moment's time.
The pit is now open.
Pit window now open, so the first 15 minutes of the race covered, so pit window open, and will keep open until the last 15 minutes of today's race, where it will then shut. New fight emerging here for a newfound third place. Potvin versus Fisher. Currently then witnessing a fight for division 3rd. Now, technically this is a fight for 8th place we're seeing carrying out between these two. Didier Potvin versus Joey Fisher for the last of the AM podiums after quite a lot of trouble then to have ensued in front of them. Very nearly an instance of contact in towards the Ford curve as the number 59 kisses the back end of the 35. Fisher trying to go the long distance there. And certainly there was some gusto behind that send, but can he carry that with any kind of momentum up towards the run of things at the Schumacher S's? Potvin pumps the brakes. Fisher finds himself in a really awkward pinch here, but he's got an open gap just up through turn 10, up towards turns 11 and 12. And looking to try and catch on board if we can here with the Ferrari of Joey Fisher. Going the long distance, sweeps over the nose there of Didier Potvin, but has he run himself out of ground? He did collect a lot of water off the exit there, and now the Mustang emerges right up and alongside him, down through Warsteiner. Joey Fisher then up to what looks to be here the case of third. Otherwise, overall 8th place. We'll see how he tackles Vidal, though. This is a tough section on the drivers already. As it stands, we see in the background emerging in the mist is Cedric Grenier-Massey, a man scorned from that race start. Originally on the podium himself, was leading that charge in the opening laps of today's race. 8 laps now covered. JM Quito emerges from the pit lane in the number 26, now having covered the first of his pit stops in today's race. LeBay catching back up towards Donkin. Meanwhile, down in the AMS, we have still the case here of a possible counter-attack for Didier Potvin. I would say it's a likelier case here. We're about to see a fight between himself and Cedric Grenier-Massey in the number 6 car out through the run of things at turn 3. Also ongoing then, Veldkamp versus Dupois down through turn 1. We spoke on Nurburgring royalty then, and Ferrari are very recently part of that accolade of N24 winners, with Ferrari winning in 2023. They find themselves level with Opel, who took a remarkable 2003 N24 win with their Vectra DTM. In terms of Ford successes at the N24, they haven't seen a victory as a manufacturer since 1987, but with the recent rise of the 7th gen Mustang across endurance racing around the world, I'd say we're not too far off then seeing the possibility of one in the next few years. They still have a few more hurdles to cross there before they find themselves a more prominent figure of the N24 grid. They did have a very good go of it this year with, I believe it was Pfaff Motorsports, had a pretty good go of it this year. Still a few more creases to iron out for Ford before they find themselves within the shot of their first N24 victory since 1987. LeBay from third at the moment, closing in on Brooklyn Donkin. So let's go to catch on board here with the Mustang number 119. On board with LeBay, 20 minutes into round 10 of the championship then here at the final round of the World Series by Competizione Performance League. You see then, Brooklyn Donkin is not going to be much a pushover in this fight. This is going to be a very hard-fought second place coming up then for LeBay. He's going to need to bargain on the opportunity that there could be a mistake made by that number 17. And of course, he's not exactly immune to those himself. We've seen that the grip has been very changeable for the Mustang. We saw, especially here up through the Schumacher S, this was a big step out for him. Fortunately, was able to catch it before it was too late. Making his way in towards Hatzenbeck's. He's got a run here on towards the run of things of Brooklyn Donkin. The fight for second place up towards Vidal. Watching from the onboard of the Mustang, we can barely make out the corners that comprise the BMW up in front. And that's what's led to so many incidents thus far. We mentioned it in the formation lap, was just the amount of spray the drivers kick up in close proximity to one another. In that last lap then, LeBay faster by 0.3 of a second, currently holds the cards of the fastest lap of the race, 2:02.965, very, very early in. When conditions were, I would say, compared to what they are right now, much more tolerable for the drivers. We've seen, and having mentioned at the start of this race, that the conditions within the first 30 minutes were going to get exponentially worse. We are seeing that swiftly come into play here. Down the RTL, that fight per second continues to rage on then. LeBay, who has claimed on multiple championships here in the Competizione Performance League. And on our screens, we've seen 4 of them so far. Not counting special events, such as the Triple Crown Enduro over the Christmas period. When we consider mainline series as part of that, we've seen LeBay claim on 4 championships, with several more we know of. We saw from 3 consecutive runs at the GT4 Pro-Am Cup. We also saw in the Jaguar GT3 Revival Series was a victory there as well. The World Series did present itself for at least the first couple of rounds, a very unique case where LeBay wasn't outright dominating the championship, but in the absence of competition from Zalan Such, and his continued development of his time at Ford has given him a lot of confidence in GT3. And a lot of that was already quite proof in point when you consider his career over on the Sunday League. Right now is the case, though, for LeBay that we won't be seeing his return to Sunday League racing for at least another season here as we get in towards Season 6. We've kicked off the first round last weekend, and if you're joining us tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. BST, we'll be going live for Round 2 at Indianapolis for the first triple sprint of the season as we take in to the new regulation format. Across the line, LeBay still gaining ground here, but making moves in conditions like these is a very, very difficult gamble. Down through to turn 1. It is worth pointing out, now whilst we've been commenting a lot on the fight for second, it is worth pointing this out, that now within 6/10 of Wright in the lead of this race is Brooklyn Donkin. So we are finding ourselves by proxy here in a 3-way split for the fight of the lead. Right now, though, for LeBay, he'll focus on second place in front of him. Meanwhile, into the pit lane goes Ben Cheeseman. Focusing away then briefly from this podium fight, we see Cheeseman into the pit lane, and an ongoing fight here. Cedric Grenier-Massey versus Didier Potvin, as Potvin now falls to the back end of the AM Division top 5. Sergio Belda leads over Richard Cecil, and Joey Fisher in third. Grenier-Massey up to the top 5 after a troublesome start. Sanchez in pursuit of Badensky. We of course saw issues for the 505 not long ago. In towards the Mercedes arena. What we're currently looking at here then, the fight of, having a glance, 6th place in the AMS between Matthew Badensky of Let's Race Mate and Ivan Sanchez of Holkianos Motorsport. We'll go back on board though to the fight on the podium as things do hot up now between LeBay and Donkin. Two drivers with quite a lot of experience racing in the wet now go toe-to-toe. Two very high-grade machines, the M4 and the Mustang. And what we are seeing then from the Lexus, Beamer and Mustang on the podium is what has been, historically speaking, 3 of some of the most dominant cars in ACC history. I think all we'd be missing out on here is the 720S as part of a 4-way fight for the lead. And you would pretty much have a documented collection of 4 of the most influential cars in Assetto Corsa Competizione history. The Lexus that was part of the very early meta on the game's release, the BMW and the McLaren that changed the meta from 2022 to 2023, and the Mustang, the latest edition from 2024, that has reshaped our thinking of GT3 balancing entirely. We'll go to catch on board though with Brooklyn Donkin, the man in the middle of this all, as now he takes stage here for a fight for the race lead. and also at the same time juggling priority to defend his second place spot away from Christian LeBay off the exit of turn 4 onto the RTL out of the Mercedes Arena section through turn 5. Now turn 6 and turn 7 here as we get in towards sector 2. Through to Dunlop. You see there, very sharp line in. He's almost got a bit of a parabolic line there. He hooks out towards the left to put the hammer down. He wants the car as level as possible before he gets onto the throttle, and some trouble there in the Schumacher S's. Does knock away some of the wind in his sails there for a fight of first. It now does bring him into the fight for second, with LeBay queuing in behind. Coming up at around Bitten Warsteiner. There is still the considerations here for the fight going on at this time between Potvin and Grenier-Massey. The 35 and the 6 down through to Dunlop. We continue to watch on here, though. The 17, the 54 and the 119 at the front of action today. Currently then seeing the fight for second between Brooklyn Donkin and Christian LeBay. A bit of trouble down at Vidal, though. And very swiftly, we are back into the fight for the lead. From Brooklyn Donkin's point of view, it's contact between himself and Wright. Fortunately, the 54 isn't knocked all the way off his feet and is still side by side with the BMW onto the opening straight. Out from Coca-Cola, we do find ourselves now in a three-way split for the race lead, side by side between the Beamer and the Lexus, but running with the winds there. The 54 puts the hammer down, but Donkin's on the inside, down through to turn 1 at Castrol, and has the look of the inside, now taking the race lead away from Wright. We see there sliding out wide in the 54. He catches it, but the car snaps violently off track. LeBay's into second, right into a reluctant P3. A very troubled turn of events there for the 54. I'm not quite clear how much of the back-end stability loss can be attributed to that brief bout of contact at turn 16, but Donkin now leads here in the Nurburgring. Christian LeBay in second, Wright in third. This has been a very, very unique position to find himself in here. Brooklyn Donkin certainly has the pace and has the on-track affinity here, the fighting knowledge to confidently lead here in the Nurburgring. Now that he's got that opportunity in his hands, what can he choose to do with it? We'll find out over the course of the next hour and a half's worth of racing. Taking a look away then from the top 3 in Pro, we take a look to the top 5 in AM. Grenier-Massey versus Potvin. Down through to the Ford curves. Half a second between each other on the run down towards Dunlop. Off the exit of turn 7 in towards turn 8. And Grenier-Massey, I must say, has done a formidable job here getting himself back up into that top 5. It was a very sudden turn of events that kicked him from the top of the podium, leading what was a confident start for the most part in AM. Even so much so as to be up ahead of the 114 of Ben Cheeseman off the race start. Actually, I believe it was, was it or was it not Kyle Jenkins as it stood? Regardless, was leading up over one of the pro cars. It was a very swift turn of events there that found him waylaid from his leading position. Now amongst that top 5, though, 1.3 seconds in the last interval away from Didier Potvin. Continue his conquest up towards a possible podium by the end of today's race. Now, with the first 30 minutes of racing covered, we do find ourselves within the next 10 minutes approaching the first of our waves of pit stops. Now, we see for some drivers, such as the case of JM Quito and Ben Cheeseman, their first pit stop has already been covered. And as it would stand to be the case, pitting on the standard pit window for these drivers now, which would have been about an hour and 20 left to go in this race with the first pit, and then about 40 minutes left in the race thereafter for the last. I think it is a case here where Cheeseman and also by proxy Quito may be looking to split things down the middle, give it about another 30 minutes and come in when there's an hour left to go in this race, giving them a full 1 hour stint. It's a big gamble for them to try for an hour and 20's worth, knowing the concerns surrounding fuel on both cars, the McLaren and the Mustang. That'll likely be their strategy, but for the rest of the field, currently
unhindered for the most part then by incidents around them or incidents involving them, they will find themselves, for better or for worse, coming in within the next 9 or so minutes. Now, wet conditions have brought it to be a case where some drivers will go in earlier, so could expect to see a counter strategy here by Donkin to come in earlier than LeBay, but this has been a bit of a coin toss for most drivers who have led over that 119 to see whether or not they will truly lead after strategy plays its hand. Of course, this is only the first of 2 pit stops, so there's still plenty to play in here. It's like a game of chess, though. You always have to play your first move not knowing how it'll end by your, say, 20th or 30th. LeBay then in second and closing in on that number 17 down towards turn 1. Meanwhile, Didier Potvin versus Cedric Grenier-Massey picks up into full swing now. And Potvin is in hot pursuit of a chance here of 4th away from Grenier-Massey with BMW in towards the Vidal chicane. We go. Looking to catch on board if we can here with Cedric Grenier-Massey. Holds his ground there. You can see that's formidable acceleration over the Mustang out through Coca-Cola curve. Meanwhile, for number 17, still leading then by 0.8 of a second down through to the Dunlop curve. Little wobble there, what looked to be on the run in towards Dunlop. Right now, weather radar shows a bit of respite in the rain in the next sort of roughly 5 minutes. Then within the next 15, we'll be picking back up also into heavy rain. So the load will get a little bit lighter here for these drivers in the next 5 minutes, giving them the possibility to push for an in-lap. You see for the number 17, that option may become a lot more viable for him sooner rather than later as LeBay gets right up onto his rear quarter. Cutting back in with these two then on the run down towards the Vidal chicane. Neither of them willing to back out of it. Someone's got to give down through into this section. LeBay tries to run things the long way around. Nearly finds himself at the rear quarter of Brooklyn Donkin, who holds on and manages the pressure then from behind from the 119 to continue his pursuit of the lead. Holding that ground now by, as it stood to be the case there, across the line. Having a glance here at the scope of about 0.4 of a second down through to turn 1. You can see with conditions getting a little bit more tolerable for the next 5 or so minutes, LeBay getting more confident under the brakes. Meanwhile, we watch on with these drivers here, but another fight brews further down the order. I believe, having a glance in here, it's between the 616 and the number 39. So that's Andrew Veldkamp and Christophe Dupois up through the Michael Schumacher S's. The Mustang continuing to lead over the 39. These two were super close to each other on the map for some time. Now seeing what entails of their fight as they make their way down through Bitten Warsteiner. Further up the order, we see here side by side Cedric Grenier-Massey versus Didier Potvin. This is for Division 4th, mind you, so down through to turn 1. Number 6 still holds ground there by holding the inside up and away from the 35 in behind. Didier Potvin looking at a shot here on the first 2 rows of the Anfield, currently straddling the back end of the top 5. Meanwhile, at the head of the field here, on the podium for the pros, it's Donkin from LeBay from right. And it does look to be a case where things are starting to swing back in favour here of the trailing 54, getting closer to LeBay and by proxy to Donkin at the front of the field. Veldkamp is in, the 616 now into the pit lane with an hour and 25 minutes left to go. So going 5 minutes under on that first stint. And as we mentioned before, the wet often does bring in earlier pit strategies. We see for LeBay now looking for the inside at Vidal. This is going to be a super risky one for the 119, but he throws himself away from it, knowing the risk it carries. Trying to put some scare tactics in there on Brooklyn Donkin, and it appears to have worked because into the pits then 4 minutes under par goes the number 17. The 119 stays out, and the 54 stays along with him. Jenkins stays out also. An executive decision then by Brooklyn Donkin, knowing the amount of pressure kicking up from behind him. He doesn't want much of that into that second stint. Comes in early. Save himself some time and space here. Meanwhile, for Sergio Belda, the leader of the AMs right now in this race, second in the AM Championship standings, currently holds ground then off of Richard Cecil. 5.5 seconds between the two front runners of the championship, with Cecil still holding the majority of the cards in towards today's round. It's 31 points in the lead here for the number 5, the American talent with Porsche. If he is to finish in this current running order, where Belda would still claim on the championship, it would, I'd say, fundamentally take for him to DNF this race to take him out of the runnings for that championship. Joey Fisher stays in third. We see here the continued fighting between Cedric Grenier-Massey and Didier Potvin for that 4th place spot. Looking for the inside then. Potvin very far on the inside, trying to run the long distance there. Gives himself a lot more ground and a lot more momentum to carry. The number 6 holds ground from the 35 in towards turn 2. Meanwhile, it's worth noting here for Wright, he is gaining the distance back on Labate, up through the Schumacher S's, now in towards Bitten Warsteiner. The 54 is on the prowl here for a possible race lead away from Labate, but of course we saw there from Donkin already into the pit lane a moment ago. So it's not unlikely to assume the same of these two here, maybe by about 1 more or 2 more laps at a push here. Right now, the closest fights among the field. Of course, up at the lead there, Wright and Labate, but this is the closest among them. Cedric Grenier-Massey versus Didier Potvin. That's currently for Division 4th in the AMs. Both of the leading pros then staying out. Jenkins follows in suit there with them. We'll see for Sergio Belda what the call is for the number 65, leading over Richard Cecil. Joey Fisher in third, and as we mentioned before, the closest fight is for 4th in the AMs between Grenier-Massey and Potvin. See, though, staying out goes Belda. As for Cecil, we'll see. Stays out. Joey Fisher from third stays out. Donkin, of course, we saw in a moment ago, so he's not likely to be coming in a second time so soon. It's these two then that find ourselves at the centre of attention, down through to Vidal. Grenier-Massey holds off there from Potvin. Do either of them make the call into the pit lane? No, being the answer for the time being. As for Badensky, we'll see here from Division 6th in the 505. No dice yet on a call into the pit lane. It would be between Dupois and Felix on their next call in. We're going to catch on board if we can here with the Lexus of Wright. 0.7 of a second away from Labate. You can see the spray has gotten a lot more manageable for the drivers now. That's what's allowed for much closer fighting, as we saw a moment ago there for Grenier-Massey and Potvin. It's also what we got to see the case there for Labate versus Donkin. Far easier now to make out the dimensions of the car in front. And the track getting ever so slightly grippier between now and the next 10 to 15 minutes. The drivers do have an opportunity to push. Meanwhile, we do just note there, that was the 616 that brought the yellow flags out. And I believe looking here, that was for Andrew Veldkamp, who we see right now was in a spot above or down at the Ford curves, but no apparent damages. So we're back into green flag conditions after 40 minutes of racing here in round 10. Into the pit lane goes Labate. Wright stays out. As for Jenkins, stays out also. Next on considerations, your podium sitters in the AM category: Sergio Belda, Richard Cecil and Joey Fisher. Wright stays out then. It's going to be interesting to see what the counterplay is for the 54. It's worth noting as well that Kyle Jenkins now holds the fastest time of the session so far in this race. 1:13, now second. With Labate's run into the pit lane. We have seen pit runs to be somewhat of a struggle here for the 119, historically speaking, but this one looks to be quite bang on. In the Ford, Belda stays out, Cecil stays out, Fisher stays out. Donkin's obviously not coming in, so it'll be between these two once again. Up through Vidal. Do either of them make the judgment call? No, being the simple answer. They're willing to fight this one out on track before either of them take glances at a pit lane run. With an hour and 19 minutes left to go. See them from Didier Potvin's point of view. Still fighting for a Division 4th there. He's going for the inside down at Castrol, but didn't dare commit to a run all the way on the inside. Was hoping for an opportunity akin to this here up through turn 2. Turn 3 as we see lap traffic there. Andrew Veldkamp rolls over to one side to allow these two on through. Oh, off into the wall there goes Cedric Grenier-Massey. Just as we glance down, we glance back up and see the BMW careening to the wall. Let's take a look at this one. Out through turn 3, we see here up towards turn 4. We can see there are pockets of standing water on the track. It was just here, right off the exit, and that caused a huge bout of snap oversteer for him there. Car stepped out to the right. He tried to correct it, caught a pocket of grip, and stepped out violently to the left, slingshotting him towards that wall. That was big trouble then for Grenier-Massey. It forfeits in position on track, 2.5 seconds away from Didier Potvin, though, as it would appear to be the case for that BMW. We go to catch on board with him here just to see the extent of the damages. Badensky's in the pit lane all through the meanwhile here. Looking here for Grenier-Massey. What has been quite a series of highs and lows for him today. Surface level damages on the BMW. More than manageable on his current stint. Of course, he is still due to the pit lane, so this will likely be a catalyst for his run-in on this lap if it wasn't already the case. Wright stays out, Jenkins stays out, Belter stays out, Cecil stays out, Joey Fisher is into the pit lane from 3rd. Potvin stays out. Grenier-Massey, in spite of damage, stays out. LeBay already having come into the pits. Same story for Cheeseman. We only find ourselves then with one other driver among the back end of the order here, gunning for a possible pit lane run. That's Danny Felix. Still yet to have taken either. We see that the rainy conditions are starting to pick back up here, and it's only going to get worse in the next 15 minutes as we go from damp conditions. What I would definitely say, had it gotten any drier, would have been a transitionary point to put the drivers on dries. Joey Fisher still in the pit lane all through the meantime. We are getting back into torrential conditions, so a little moment of respite there with much lighter rain in force. It's going to get a lot worse from here on out before we cross over the first hour of racing and into the halfway mark of round 10. You see there, well, Danny Felix moves over to allow Richard Cecil on through. The two leading drivers then, Wright and Jenkins, continue to stay out. We'll leave you on board with the number 5 of Richard Cecil. Now within 6.3 seconds of Sergio Belda at the lead of the AMS. We'll catch on back in with you in just a moment's time. Still on board then with Richard Cecil, taking a look back into the wider scope of things on today's session. Wright stays out, and so too does Jenkins. Sergio Belda, as it comes to be the case, then will be next in considerations. Currently leading the AMs. We'll see how things fare with our two AM leaders still yet to have come in to the pit lane for the first of 2 times today. Just over 45 minutes then in towards round 10, the final stop of the World Series. Into the pit lane goes Sergio Belda. Richard Cecil now down through Vidal. Behind him, Brooklyn Donkin, who played that early game strategy. Playing things a little earlier than most for this first of 2 pit stops. And so far for Donkin, it has played wonderfully into his hands, because he does find himself a solid distance there up the road from Christian Lebay. About a corner and a straight swerve there, so a decent amount, all things considered. Didier Potvin now to the pit lane, goes the number 35, currently 3rd in the AMs right now. We saw his fight with Cedric Grenier-Massey, who elects to stay out, overtaking Potvin. Of course, with the 114 already in for the first time, the only other driver on consideration, as mentioned before, would be Danny Felix. So we still find ourselves facing down a few outliers here, Felix included, as now Grenier-Massey, Jenkins and Wright are the current outliers, and Cecil for that matter, I should say, are the current outliers to this starting strategy. Richard Cecil still with a point to prove here. He's out past Sergio Belda, of course, who's just come from the pit lane now off of his first pit stop today. And he's looking not only at the championship title in the AM Drivers division, he's also looking at a possible chance of solidifying the season off with yet another race win. Taking a look back through his performance throughout the season, this would be gunning on for what currently stands here for Richard Cecil at the scope of about, looking here, that would be say about 7 wins here we're looking at. 2 in Silverstone, 1 in round 2, then in rounds 5 and 6, then later down the line 2 in the Hungaroring, and those first 2 races of 3. 7 wins total, looking to make a nice round number out of it for a possible 8th race win this season to solidify his position as an AM Drivers champion. Still playing for the long game then. A curious case then for Richard Cecil. Same story for Wright and Jenkins. Neither of which yet to commit to anything pit lane wise. We'll see here for Grenier-Massey, one of the other outliers of this field, to see whether or not he'll come in. Of course, he is still nursing damages from his incident from earlier on, just out through the Mercedes arena section, where he had a violent bout of snap oversteer. Into the pit lane goes Grenier-Massey. That car has been very unhappy with him throughout today, as evidenced by its recent troubles there in mounting wet conditions. Into the pits he goes then. 11 minutes left to go on the first hour of racing today before we're halfway through on the final round. Worth pointing out here for Brooklyn Donkin, he has wasted no time building that gap up away from Lebay. 16.2 seconds between these two. As it stands to be the case right now, the Brit determined to continue his lead here in the Nurburgring, away from what was a rather controversial bout of things between himself and Wright down at turn 16. He had a good exit off of Vidal and took his possibly one and only chance, given that situation, to go for the inside. It ended with a bit of contact between the pair. I believe very nearly was contact there with Richard Cecil. A little bit shell-shocked from the arrival of the BMW. You can see he does give him the hazard lights there, apologising for what was otherwise a bit of an abrupt run into things here. Grenier-Massey is on his way out, but as it would appear, damage was not at the forefront of his concerns when it came to changes in the pits there. I believe this was just fuel and tyres for the number 6 at this time. A relatively quick stop for the BMW, as evidenced by the fact that they still harbour a lot of those damages from that incident down at the Mercedes arena. Donkin now obviously up and ahead of Richard Cecil. We'll see though in the case of the number 5, is he coming into the pits? We see for Wright and Jenkins currently no dice on that one. Same story. The number 5 of Richard Cecil. Currently closest gap we have here. Sanchez v Potvin, 1.1 seconds for a position on track. That's now 0.8 seconds as they get up and around here because of his stop in the pit lane. The number 6 of Grenier Massey. We do take note there. That was trouble we heard for the 39, I believe. Yes, down at turn 1, Christophe Dupois. We heard the sound of an engine at idle climb up to the revs there. Someone was stuck in the gravel, and it was the 39 now emerging back onto the track. Currently 14th overall. So looking to go and catch on board if we can here with this fight between the two Mustangs. Oh, as you see there for Didier Potvin, out through Hatzenbeck's into the wall. A huge clatter there for the number 35. Off the exit of the Hatzenbecksbogen. A huge clash with the wall. The back end came loose on the Mustang. That could surely see him into the pits here. As that car, yes, you can see the steering system compromised on the Mustang into the pits. Then a shock turn of events for Didier Potvin, who's found himself at the forefront of many a fight here in the AM category. Now finds himself limping to the pit lane after a huge clatter against the wall off the exit of the Hatzenbecksbogen. At turn 13, big trouble for the 35. Into the pits he goes. We see here Sanchez v Grenier Massey, and you can see from what we spoke of earlier on with the spray was still tolerable about 5-10 minutes ago. We see now that and the grip levels have plummeted way into the red here for these drivers. Back onto conditions much akin to what we saw in the start of this race, if not worse. Down through to the Ford curve. We watch here Cedric Grenier Massey struggling to keep along with that BMW sliding around under its own weight down through the Ford curve. You've got to appreciate for a moment here the tenacity surrounding the number 5's current strategy. I mean, this is very bizarre we're seeing from Richard Cecil. He's playing quite a heavy gamble here, knowing all it would take was a conventional drive in amongst the top 5 to see him through to a championship nice and comfortably, but he's not willing to see out his championship in a quiet manner. He does want a look at the full pot here and a possible 8th race win to go alongside it. And that's why he's been pushing himself to the absolute limit, as we just saw there, down through turn 7. A huge front-end lockup on that Porsche, as he continues to hammer the number 5 down through the GP Strecke here at the Nurburgring in continuously worsening conditions. Right now, weather radar does show rain will clear in about 15 minutes, so there could be light at the end of this proverbial tunnel, and that's perhaps what Richard Cecil is willing to play the long game for. You do get a lot of these stubborn strategies from drivers who maybe know a thing or two about what the weather might be inclined to do in this race. We were told it was mixed conditions. There was no guarantees of it being a wet race, so there's no guarantees that it will stay a wet race. And I believe that's what maybe the number 5 is chipping into here. Another yellow flag coming out. It's the 65 in trouble, Sergio Belda. And now when you consider that Belda was for the longest time here after Grenier Massey leading in the AMS, this has now kicked the door wide open strategy-wise for Richard Cecil. We just got word there, a driver now, I believe, having left this race. As we are now down a driver, it's one of the, looking there, oh my. It was the 119 and the 17, I believe. Are we hemorrhaging drivers here? We were warned about connection issues, and we will be continuously updating as we go along, but we have just got confirmation there was a disconnect for the number 17 and the number 119. I believe, as we see here from Jenkins, this is an intentional pit stop from the 113. You can note there now whether or not this was the case the whole time, there is damage on the back end of that Ferrari. We see the reconnect there from Brooklyn Donkin. There could be some troubles on the horizon. Number 616, Andrew Veldkamp in the grass, as it stands to be the case there. The number 616 Mustang stranded out through Hatzenbeck's. Now the same area that caught out Didier Potvin a few laps ago. Very nearly gave the 616 much of the same fate here. An hour and 4 minutes left to go here in the Nurburgring, and there has been big drama between two of the leading cars under strategy today. With Jenkins still in the pit lane, we also get word there of a reconnect for was that? No, not Sergio Belda. It's one of the Hoggianos cars, certainly. I believe, looking here, that's JM Quito. Was that whether or not it's a reconnect, but he has come into the pits regardless, is the 26. And there are some concerns surrounding stability now at this time. We see here Budensky down through Wittenwarsteiner. Wright stays out. Jenkins having played a strategy to a T here, and in the recent troubles surrounding the 17 and the 119, 5-star have risen to the occasion here for a double podium with the 113 and 114. Now having just briefly swapped places to put Schiessman in Division 2nd, Jenkins for Division 3rd with the fastest lap. Richard Cecil still holds out strong here, knowing there is possibly light at the end of the tunnel. The next 15 minutes on weather radar are showing us evidence towards a possible clear of rainfall, but now into the pits, better late than never. Currently the strategy then of Richard Cecil. Into the pits goes the number 5 after recent troubles surrounding him. Could find himself very much here at the head of the table in the AM drivers category. We'll continue to monitor the situation surrounding the simultaneous disconnect of the 17 and the 119 to see whether or not there are any further relevant cases here for a concern surrounding server stability. And we'll keep you informed as and when anything changes. Into the pit lanes then go the number 5. Number 65 only a few corners away here, so if it's a quick stop here for Richard Cecil, he could still find himself leading over Sergio Belda. I will point this out as well for Belda. It has been a very swift recovery to action here. We see Cecil rockets from the pit lane. You can see right off the limiter because he was on the final pit box of the pit lane there. Was able to stop and drop, effectively getting up and off his jacks. Having refilled the car off the jacks, only a few meters there to the line, so really only spent, I'd say, about as long as it would take for that Porsche to accelerate to 30 miles an hour to then get out through the limiter and put the hammer down. Cecil having beneficial position then on the grid is going to give him a lot to speak of when it comes to those strategies, because he can do things very quickly in the pit lane, which perhaps was part of the knowledge on why he stayed out for so long. Weather radar still give us the indication that rain will be clearing in 15 minutes. We'll update that as and when there are any further developments. Right now, rain is set to worsen for at least the next 5 minutes. 10 minutes thereafter that could be a lot clearer for these drivers. Now, no indication yet on if we'll be getting firmly into dry racing. That'll come through with the line of information we have. Right now, though, is the case. Richard Cecil has been able to emerge ahead of Sergio Belda under his first run through the pits. Number 17 still in the pit lane at the moment, I believe. Is it the case for the 119 that he is back out onto the track here? I believe, yes, we do see for LeBay now 14th overall after troubles with disconnects. The 119 back out on track. We do take note there. Yellow flags out. Number 6 down at the Ford curve. Cedric Grenier-Massey back into green flag conditions there as he's back up and running. No further damages as it would appear for the number 6 BMW, but was a step out for him that brought the white flags and then subsequently the yellow flags out.
We are halfway through, not over yet.
Halfway through today's race, and at the moment, Wright still yet to have played his 1 of 2 pit stops. This could be the turning point for him, though, if he's trying to run things halfway on through. We've seen unorthodox strategies in the past from this one. Of course, was paramount in his successes in Watkins Glen. Always a trick up this one's sleeve, so we'll be curious to see what he makes of it over the course of today's session. 1.3 and closing then the gap between Kyle Jenkins and Joey Fisher for an overall 5th place spot. The battle among the Ferraris on this grid today. Following on board then with Kyle Jenkins. And you can, well, I was about to say you can see, you can barely see the Ferrari in front until we're right on top of him here. Joey Fisher now taken from the inside by Kyle Jenkins. A very neat move there for him. Nice, neat and tidy up towards the Schumacher S's, but this is where things could collapse. And as we see, contrary to that, then filing into single file up through turns 9 and 10. Great move then by Kyle Jenkins, now into that top 5. A component of the current podium then in the pro category. You see for Joey Fisher, big step out for him there. Nearly put him inadvertently in the pit lane. We saw similar issues over the course of today's session for, I believe it was Badensky had a very similar problem. We also saw the same issue for Wright during qualifying today. Stability still on a heavy consideration for drivers today. Big concern for them for the run into this round. No word then on the release of either JM Keto or Brooklyn Donkin, as the 26 and the 17 remain in the paddock then, 15th and 16th, currently bringing the tally of operational vehicles on track, as we see here with the 14th among them, with the reconnect of the 119 of LaBay. Currently brings us to only 14 vehicles left in contention on what started as a grid of 16 cars, 8 on either side of which, now 7 on either side of which, with only 14 left to go. Take a look around the field then to see where other possible fights may be coming from. We do find ourselves here as we head in towards the second half of the race, met with a resounding number of stalemates, especially with the recent troubles surrounding Keto and Donkin, and also with LaBay for that matter. We do find ourselves with several pieces of the puzzle now missing, and an incomplete picture on the wider scope of today's race. Danny Felix and Matthew Badensky find themselves close to one another, but on strategy, they'll not likely find themselves much closer than they are right now. You have to excuse us just one moment as we do quickly just check on something here. We'll leave you on with the 113. Okay, we're just going to quickly conduct a bit of a audio check. For some context as well, whilst we stay on board here with Kyle Jenkins, at the time of recording right now, it is about, I want to say about 29, 30 degrees outside. Now, this is 29 and 30 degrees Celsius in British weather, which is this really oppressive, muggy heat. And right now is a case where I've had to turn my air conditioner on because the room, I don't think this is anywhere close to what it is outside. In fact, I think it's hotter in this room right now with the PC blaring heat out, the Xbox blaring heat out, I think we're probably in the range of about 35 to 36 degrees interior. And suffice it to say, I'm melting. So I'm turning the air conditioner on, and we're making sure that's not interfering with the audio too much in particular, so that the broadcast can continue on schedule. 53 minutes then left to go. As it happens to be the case there, we did check in, and it's only a very minor static. So as a bit of a clarification, and we'll post this at the bottom of the video a little later on in this broadcast, the reason why we do have a bit of a staticky layer over our voice today is because we have had to been forced to turn the air conditioner on right now. Way too hot in the recording studio at this time. Still on board though with Kyle Jenkins all throughout. So as we take a look away then from the two Ferraris, as their fight starts to dissipate here, looking in to find that Danny Felix finally in for the first of his 2 pit stops in today's session. Taking a look further around the order then as we drop into the last 50 minutes of racing. Wright still yet to have taken either, so definitely playing for an unorthodox strategy on his final race of the season. Cheeseman currently in second, Richard Cecil in third, Sergio Belda in fourth. Now it's worth considering Cecil and Belda at the forefront of the AMs right now find themselves on the second row to the front row of pros. Kyle Jenkins in a division third then for a 5-star double podium amidst dismays there for the 119 and the 17, both of which have returned to racing here in the Nurburgring. Taking a look out past the top 5, Joey Fisher in 6th, last on the podium then for the AMs. We see for Ivan Sanchez, currently division 4th and 7th overall, rounding out the division top 5 for AMs. Currently 8th overall, Cedric Grenier-Massey. Matthew Badensky, his teammate and Let's Race mate, currently 9th with Danny Felix, rounding out the top 10. Christophe Dupois in 11th. Now we must consider the 985 did take a long time to come into the pit, so he, I believe, yes, has dropped position to Felix, but not to Didier Potvin. Currently finds himself in 12th. Andrew Veldkamp with damage on the nose, currently 13th. LeBay 14th. Donkin in 15th. And JM Keto, as of yet to have left the pit lane and is currently in 16th, possibly to be a DNF in today's race. You see a newfound fight then as we continue on board with Jenkins nearly looking on the inside there at contact between himself and Belda, but goes all the way for the inside and swings on through to a claim of 4th place overall in today's race. So far so good then for the 113, has really turned his fortunes around as we head in towards the last stint of the race at about 9 minutes time. Now, when we spoke earlier in this broadcast, it was a case where we theorized that the strategy today, much like other 1x120 races we've had this season on the World Series, would be a 40-40-40. Wet conditions have obviously made that a bit of a turning point for a lot of these drivers. Earlier strategies we've seen implemented in this race. We've also seen in the case of the 54, has been a very bizarre turn of things now. I believe, having a glance there, up in front, that is the 54 of Wright, as he is still yet to have come into the pits himself. And as we start to see it then, your eyes do not deceive you. The conditions on track are getting brighter and clearer as the water is forded on the track surface right now. we do have a moment of respite for these drivers, but not for particularly long though. Within the next 15 minutes, we're back into rainy conditions here at the Nurburgring. So this is just a little bit of a breathing point for these drivers, making their way down towards turns 6 and 7, out through turn 5 at the RTL. Down towards the forward curve, right playing the mother of all strategies, as it would appear then for the 54. This oddball approach to strategy is what gained him such paramount success in Watkins Glen earlier this season on his charge to a first World Series win. Richard Cecil then still stands at the lead of Am. This has been a miraculous turnaround for that number 5. Swamped in off the race start, but then finds himself leading the field then, leveraging better consistency over what looked like in the last couple of rounds then a nearly unshakable performance for Sergio Belda in recent weeks. Finally cracks forming in the facade. That's been to great news then for the number 5, who's used every opportunity he can to secure this lead. He still has 47.5, just under actually, before the end of this race. In the pit lane at the moment then is not only JM Keto, but we also see there for Brooklyn Donkin is back in the number 17. Now, whether or not he's content to see the race out by himself, or if he's come back in now as his efforts to wrap up here, obviously multiple laps down, not to his own fault, it wouldn't be really too much of a situation where you could blame him if he were to back out of this race. But I think we're seeing the former rather than the latter. Knowing the kind of driver that Brooklyn Donkin is, it does take quite a lot to get him to back out of one of these races. He's already demonstrated more than enough fortitude to get back into the swing of things after his disconnect. So I think this is him playing his strategy in the number 17. 46.5 minutes then left to go. It does seem rather on brand, because this would be about 6 through to 8 minutes under par, which is what we have seen from Donkin. He does like to play these strategies a little closer to the chest, a little earlier than most, trying to get himself in the best possible position. The last thing you want to be in when you're going for these strategies is in traffic on exit. You're coming out with fresher tyres that you're having to bed in, whether it's dry or wet conditions. In wet conditions like this, you'll be in traffic you can barely see. So especially in the case here for Donkin, when he played his first strategy before his disconnect, that was in efforts to try and clear himself of a lot of the traffic around him, knowing that it would have been nonetheless a quick stop. He didn't want to find himself held up with many distractions into the second stint. It's just a pity then that it's gone the way that it has for him over the course of today's race. 45.5 minutes left to go. We do note here the arrival of a fight for Christian LeBay. Also suffered that disconnect earlier in this race. Right now sets his sights on Andrew Veldkamp for an overall 13th place spot. Now, going on board, if we can here, with the 119, sets his sights on one of his own teammates. So don't expect things to be too much on the theatric end here for LeBay, as he has played things a little bit softer around the edges with his teammates. And of course, as a team owner, that's realistically the stance you'd want to have. So making his way out through the forward curves. And there, I think just pumping the brakes ever so slightly, Veldkamp gave him the position over, allowing him to continue on through. It's not going to change his positioning in the AMS, 2 separate divisions. We see sort of team orders like that play out all the time. All, you know, of course, perfectly legal, because it's not a case where it's to the detriment of one driver over the other. These are 2 different drivers in 2 different divisions. It makes no difference who's where. It would just be more beneficial if the driver currently chasing for position could get out past the driver who's already holding one. The 54 is in. So this has certainly been a bit of a bizarre one for Wright. Now, I have a bit of a theory on this one here, having just a quick glance at what he's gone for so far. So he's come in, I would say he's tried to go for 45 minutes left, and he's sold himself a bit short here and come in when it's about 44 minutes left to go. I have a theory he's going to try and gun this one as close as possible to that pit window closing with 15 minutes left to go. I have it on cards here. He could be in by 17 minutes left to go. That's the current call from us here. I would gladly be wrong on that, but I get the feeling that's what he's gunning for. He wants to keep a bit of a safety net here and come in when he's still got the opportunity to stop and change tyres or do whatever it is that he needs to do. He's off the Jackson on his way out, lighting up the rear end as he does. And a very swift exit there for Wright. Continues to hold in the ground over Ben Cheeseman, now second in the Pro Division, second overall as well as it stands in this race. Let's see for Richard Cecil then. 43 minutes away from championship glory in the AM Drivers' Championship. Still leading that charge up and away from Sergio Belda in second. It's nonetheless been a fantastic drive for him to turn things around. Right now, in terms of closest gaps, not many on the cards, bar that previous fight we saw for Veldkamp v. LeBay. .1 seconds between Grenier, Massey and Sanchez, but we've seen it's been a real series of ups and downs here for the Let's Race mate number 6 BMW. Stood at the head of the field onto lap 1, and after a few laps in, an incident has taken him from the chances of not only that top 3 right now, but it could even be for a chance of a wider top 5. He holds on to 5th there by a shoestring in that number 6, already harbouring damages with previous incidents there off the exit of the Mercedes arena. Ultimately, what thwarted him that position away from Ivan Sanchez. We see his teammate is getting up through the order now, Division 6th for Matthew Badensky in the Let's Race mate number 505. It'll be very curious then to see how this team gets on. They've been quite quickly onto our radar in the last couple of weeks, having made their debut to our screens over the course of both the World Series and then the week thereafter into GT4 Pro-Am Cup America. I'll be very curious to see how they get on, of course. We see the 2 main drivers we've seen for the most part here, Cedric Grenier-Massey and Matthew Badensky. And taking a look over their portfolio this season, of course, Grenier-Massey, a 2-time race winner. Now having taken victories in the triple header in Barcelona, then later down the line in that of the Hungaroring. And we've noted his style for driving in these shorter 3x40 races has been one of a sort of longer contemplation. He uses the first 2 races, and we made this claim over in the Hungaroring, and I'd say it would probably still stand in the long run. He takes a lot of the time then in to scout out the rest of the course, and that's the good thing about the 3x40s, is he's able to do so. But here on these 2-hour races, he's had to play things a lot closer to the chest, and still does find himself, it is worth pointing this out, within a shot here of Ivan Sanchez, 2.6 seconds. So he has, in the time since having spoken about his performance so far, closed the gap in and could be within range. We see then in the pit lane, number 91, Ivan Sanchez is in. So that does allow Cedric Grenier-Massey up towards 4th place. We'll see how in the long run this comes to change between these two. So we did see their fighting earlier on where Grenier-Massey ultimately ended up snapping into the wall. I believe we still have this on the replays here, taking a look back to find then this was the incident a few laps ago on lap 19 of this race. Out through turn 4, the exit of turn 4 into turn 5, there was that snap oversteer, put him in the wall. It was in his fight not with Sanchez, it was in his fight with Didier Potvin at the time ultimately waylaid him from his higher position on track. We see there, that was the number 17 of Brooklyn Donkin, moving over to allow Cedric on through. Behind him there looks to be, if I'm not mistaken, that is the 119. So that is Christian LeBay. Of course, both of these drivers having disconnected some time ago. We see weather conditions now very, very poor on track. And in the next 5 minutes, still going to pick up. And currently for the next 10 minutes will sustain. So it looks like we're still very much in store for wet racing throughout today. There was that very small, but not numerically impossible chance the weather could have cleared enough to facilitate a transition from wet to dry. But I think feasibly right now we're just not going to see that with how persistent the rain's been. If we were to suddenly drop away, say in the last 13 to 10 minutes in towards dry conditions where the rain wasn't going to come back before the race ended, then you could have possibly seen the drivers maybe make the attempt for it, but I'd still say it wouldn't be a tenable strategy, at least for the ones up at the front of the field. We see there for LeBay now up past Donkin. But of course, with Donkin already multiple laps down off of LeBay, these two only battling in spirit for the position at hand. Grenier Massey caught in between the pair of them. With Sanchez having played his last pit stop then, it's going to be a curious one for the recovery of a top 5 position then for the 91. Currently hangs in Division 6th. Has to clear both the Let's Race Mate BMWs to be back on his original position before his pit stop run of 4th. And as we've seen, now surpassing the last 40 minutes of racing, where you would have expected on a 40-40-40 strategy that drivers would have come in by this point. We've only seen a few of them do it, such as that of Ivan Sanchez in most recent occasion. We see here a newly emerging fight, Richard Cecil versus Kyle Jenkins. This is one to watch then. Let's go to catch on board with these two in their newly found fight for third. Now again, much as we saw for the quote-unquote fighting between Veldkamp and LeBay, this one for these drivers does still remain as something quite inconsequential. It's not going to affect their standing in category. Jenkins is technically still third in the pros, and as for Richard Cecil, he still leads in the AMs. These two drivers may still find themselves clashing heads here for an outright position on track. Oh, as we see there, a little wobble for Cecil. We have seen in the last couple of races he has played things remarkably tactically. We saw it through the Hungaroring rounds, where if he had a pro driver pressuring from position, he wasn't about to compromise and waste time defending, ultimately doing more damage to himself than he would have to any of the drivers he was actually competing with in category. So I wouldn't say it's off the occasion here. And yes, you can see right off the bat, it's tacticianry. It is at the end of the day. That's the case with a lot of multi-class racing, where you have different classifications of vehicle. They have different championships to play for. You end up in these points where a conflict of interest just isn't, it's just not good for business for these drivers. They're not interested to fight each other for an overall position, because all it is posturing on a grid that is already split down the middle. And as we mentioned before he even committed to the move, Jenkins was already third in division. And this only solidifies it for him. Just under 35 minutes left to go. Ben Cheeseman is into the pit lane. We've just got wind of that there. The number 114 now in for 5-Star Esports McLaren. That's his final pit stop. And we still have it on the cards here. The prediction of Wright going in for as close as he dare get to the point of no return on the pit window. Currently the pit window scheduled to close 15 minutes before the end of the race. We have it on the cards that he'll do it within 17 minutes left to go. Bedensky now in the number 505. And so the 54 continues to lead, and Wright is looking at a chances here of a third victory in the pro category over the course of his time in this series. His first win in round 4, his most recent win in the last of 3 races at round 9. A third win on the cards here for the Lexus. would certainly be one way to wrap out the championship for what has been, for all intents and purposes, a very solid run of things here for Wright. And in line with what we were told by race control and what's been scheduled ahead of time, he's part of the interview bracket for drivers. So this could very well be for quite an interesting chat with him today. If he is to emerge as race winner in the next 33 minutes, it certainly looks likely to be the case then for Wright. Down towards turn 1 he goes. Go to catch back on board with these drivers. We do see a significant block of drivers now having taken their final pit stops. So we see for Ben Cheeseman, Sergio Belda, Ivan Sanchez, Matthew Bedensky, Didier Potvin and Brooklyn Donkin all having taken their 2 mandatory pit stops and are cleared for the rest of this race. We see for Kyle Jenkins, what is currently the going rates here for the Ferrari? As it stands to be the occasion here, staying out in the 113, down through to turn 16 we go. As for Joey Fisher, now closing within range then of Richard Cecil, but he has still a long distance to cover, about 23 seconds, as it happens to be the case between himself and the number 5 at the head of the AM category. Speaking of, here is Richard Cecil down through to turn 1. We see then Christophe Dupois, one of the latest attendees to the pit lane. We see also there the 119 of Christian Lebet. Both of them now in for their final stops of today. Just under 30 minutes left to go. Or just over, I should say. Sorry, though. You see for Wright, just as we caught on with the 54, was a bit of a wobble for him off the exit of turn 1 at the Castrol S. Into the Mercedes Arena section. And we still have it on the cards. We'll see him into the pit lane roughly about 13 or so minutes from now. Lexus has been on formidable form throughout today, and that oddball strategy combined with troubles for his contemporaries in the pro category have paved the road forward here. The 54's possible 3rd victory to wrap out the season. For the most part, though, battling on a wider scale here has started to fizzle out for these drivers. There is the possibility of an advance of gap here with Didier Potvin, about 7.7 seconds. And we saw there, just having caught on with him, starting to slim down between himself and Danny Felix for control of an overall 10th place spot. Now, what this would represent in category with Richard Cecil now into the pit lane. Joey Fisher across the line to, for the time being, take the lead of the AMs. A very curious turn of events there for the number 5. Played things very close, but nowhere near as close as I think we might have it here from the number 54. So Fisher now leads in AM with Cecil in the pits at the moment. As for Cedric Grenier-Massey, will he be into the pit lane? Yes, for the number 6 for his 2nd and final stop today. So looking further down the line for what this... Oh, my goodness there. Yes, that was a collision on the pit wall, I believe, there for the number 6. Having a look here on the replay, I think it was just a bit of understeer. He's gone in, turn, and the car's just not going with him. Oh, that's horrible. And that's additional front-end damage. And I think might be, by the looks of things there, damage significant enough to warrant concern. As we see here, pulling in towards his pit box. In the number 6 car there, you can see the scope of the front-end damage far worse than when he came in. back into the conversation here of the advance between Potvin and Felix, what this would represent for the AM category drivers at this time. Currently stands as the case here. We'd be looking, I believe here, looking at P7 with the number 35 and the number 985. We see, though, there's been continued troubles here for Didier Potvin because he's been intercepted by a lot of the lapping traffic. Moreover, he had a few issues of his own just before that point, so he is starting to lose time off to Danny Felix in front. As for the 985, we see right now still yet to have taken his second and final pit stop down through Bitten Warsteiner at turns 11 and 12. Off the exit there, Warsteiner collects a little bit of the gravel with him, so that's going to drag him down just a little bit there. Joey Fisher stays out then, now having found himself at the lead of the AM division for this race. His nearest current threat would be the number 114, Ben Cheeseman, with 5-Star Esports McLaren. The only remaining drivers then, before the end of this race, still set to come in. With recent troubles there for Andrew Veldkamp, we've just seen there a drive-through penalty for, I believe, speeding in the pit lane it was there for the 616. Now emerges as a new concern here for Malwar Racing's AM division, and I believe the writing is certainly on the wall here for them to lose out in the AM Teams Championship away from Holkianos Motorsports. We'll have all of that confirmed, though, at the checkered flag today. What we now have is a case here, only 4 drivers left to take that final pit stop. Wright, which we still have on the cards here, will be in within the next 9 minutes. We've currently got it predicted around 17 minutes left to go in the race where he'll come into the pit lane. Kyle Jenkins currently in second in this race with the fastest lap. Joey Fisher now finding himself in the lead of the AMs. For how much longer being the real question. And of course, Danny Felix, we spoke on earlier, is starting to lose droves of distance over Didier Potvin behind. With that gap now down at 7 seconds. In a recent update, though, that could even be further south of it as we round through the Dunlop Curragh at turn 8. 6.2, so down 8 tenths then. It's a case where sooner rather than later might be the call here for Danny Felix, because he is losing a lot of distance off to Didier Potvin. One way or another, that 35 will intercept him. The case is, does he want it to happen on track or off it? You see currently tucked up behind him then, the 54 in the lead of this race. Looking for race win number 3 to round out Season 1 of the Competizione Performance League World Series. And if you caught on with us far earlier in the broadcast, whether during our talks of the extended free practice session or during our news segment, we are happy to announce that Season 2 of the Competizione Performance League World Series, powered by Malwar Transport, will come live in October 2026. That's according to Race Control. That's the information we have to pass forward. Into the pit lanes then goes Danny Felix. In the background there, the number 35 in closing range, so was the right call for the 985. We do take note there, and I believe that was the number 17. Yes, so we are now down to only the scope there of 15 cars left. I believe we have just witnessed a disconnect again here for the number 17 of Brooklyn Donkin. A sad way for his season to end, but nonetheless a prominent presence on the field. In fact, I believe it was the case heading in towards tonight's round. He did find himself looking here at the pro driver standings, was as a matter of fact on the podium after 3 consecutive podium finishes in the Hungaroring last week. Sadly, an inevitable reality of sim racing is its waves of disconnects. And this is something that has befell Brooklyn Donkin a little too often. The number 17 forced out of another race once again. I mean, it's a bitter thing for a driver to go through. And sadly, much in the case, as we've seen on a larger scale, especially server-wise, is something that the race control teams of any league have quite very little input on actually controlling. A lot of that's up in the ether when it comes to controlling how the servers work and server functionality. A lot of leagues try to run a sort of meet in the middle mentality. We've seen this with, I believe we saw this with AXRL, where they actually ran on American servers, knowing that some of the drivers were connecting in from Europe, most of which, of course, because of the league's more national status, it was a case where a lot of drivers were already tuning in from Oceania, so primarily Australia and New Zealand. But because of that sort of willingness to conform to both sides, they sort of met in the middle on this. Now, I'd still say, considering we have primarily audiences from North America and Europe, this is about as meet in the middle as we'll get, is American East Coast. These servers have already proven themselves to be a little bit on the wonky end, I'd say, especially with weather being such a pressing factor on their functionality in the last couple of months. Of course, there's not a great deal race control can do about it, and that's a brutal reality, is that it's just always going to be a little bit on the blink, and we see that no one's spared of it, European or American alike. So, of course, he's on the easternmost side of Canada, Lobe, so it's a case where he's connecting in also from that sort of geographical region of the world, from North America, continental North America, and it's having much to the same issues. Sadly, I'm not intelligent enough or educated enough on how server functionality or wireless connection or server technology works in any of that regard to give you an educated understanding. That's why I'm a motorsports commentator, not a server commentator. I imagine it would be a very boring profession. 22 minutes left to go. And still 3 drivers then, all 3 of which heading up the field, yet to have come to the pit lane. Joey Fisher and Kyle Jenkins. Could be sooner rather than later. We'll see, though. I think for Kyle Jenkins, he is trying his dearest here to try and run a counter strategy on right. But considering these two are about half a distance of the track from each other, this is going to be a difficult one for him to try and counter. So I believe it's for that reason that Kyle Jenkins has come into the pit lane. Now assessing the reality of his situation. The 113 in for the last time today. As for Joey Fisher, in through the Vidal chicane. He elects to stay out, so he will overtake Kyle Jenkins with about 21 minutes left to go in this race. And Joey Fisher not only looking to outperform 2 of the pro drivers, really trying his dearest here to hold position. You can see in the background, though, approaching from behind is Ben Cheeseman. He's also looking to try and put enough distance between himself and Richard Cecil for a possible overcut strategy. You take a look at the distance between each other, a very short stop could give him the advantage he'd need. As it stands to be the case, though, he's about looking here. It's a little tough to say because we don't quite know the interval yet between Cecil and Cheeseman across the line. Currently stands the ground about 39 seconds away from Richard Cecil. 20.5 minutes left to go. Only 2 drivers left to fit into that puzzle strategy-wise before the end of today's race. You see the rain coming back in now. After another little moment's respite for these drivers, the rain back in force. So things about to get a little bit more difficult for them in the last 20 minutes. Perhaps this is what both Fisher and Wright have been waiting for. Seeing here a difference in overall position, but 2 drivers still close to each other. Christophe Dupois and Ivan Sanchez, 13th and 8th respectively. On to, in the case here of Dupois, lap 45. In the case of Sanchez, lap 46. You see then Joey Fisher is about to be intercepted by Ben Cheeseman. You can see the Ferrari, though, holding off to the right-hand side of the track. But it wasn't necessarily an effort to let him on by initially. He's just sort of cutting some of that slipstream away from Cheeseman, who goes very deep on the brakes down into turn 1. You can see the McLaren fidgets under the brakes as he does there. Very sensitive under the brakes, the 720S. Out through turn 2, up towards turn 3 we go here in the Mercedes Arena. Now gets up over Joey Fisher, up into an overall second place spot. I think what we saw there from Fisher was somewhat of a compromise, such in a case where he wanted to let the McLaren out pass, but he didn't want to do so in such a way that would scrape any more time away from him, which is why he kept things, relatively speaking, elbows out in towards turn 1, and only after turn 1 did he sort of pump the brakes a little bit there for the 114. He wanted to go into an area where he knew he wasn't going to lose a particularly great deal of time for forfeiting position. We go to catch on board here with Wright. Now, we had it on the cards that this would be 17 minutes is when he would choose to come into the pits. He's trying to run this as close as humanly possible, I'd say, to the chances of a pit right before the pit window shuts. You can see his car sliding there, so I think we might be quite close in that assessment. Whilst we stay on board with the 54, we do have some more exciting announcements surrounding our own broadcast itinerary. It's coming up into June. We're about to head on into a brand new project then with the folks over at Orange Line Racing. A brand new league then, founded by a former member of MSC, that being Jonathan Curran, and also co-founding it along with him then was the MSC Season 4 Drivers Champion Owen Camus. Now set up a brand new league, and we've signed on to record for Friday evening slots then between an ACC GT series and an LMU multi-class series. That'll be live from Friday evening, and just like that, like clockwork, into the pits around the 17-minute mark then goes Wright into the pit lane. Donkin reconnects to the session. And this was something I thought was quite funny, to be fair, as we now see the Wrights in the pit lane. We'll wait to see, though, what is the current verdict for Joey Fisher, as he actually stays on for one more lap. This is a tremendous risk the number 59 is carrying along with him now in his efforts to try and overcut Richard Cecil. And this was something I thought was quite funny, talking about the Orange Line Racing contract, because we saw a lot of their promotional material had been they've been put up in the last couple of days. They have been quite hard at work trying to get as much material out, but it's somewhat abundantly clear to me that it was AI generated. Because, funnily enough, so obviously our involvement with the league is strictly on recording basis. You know, we do record streams for them. That's what our plan is right now with Orange Line Racing. I thought it was quite funny because, bless them, they want to include our logo in the promotional material, but their AI has generated a bizarre slogan for TRTN somehow. And here's the thing, we don't have a company slogan, so this is certainly news to me if we have one. And it was, I think it was something along the lines of "Your race, our voice." I mean, it's bold. I'm not going to say it ain't, but it's bizarre to me. First I've heard of it that we have a company slogan here on TRTN. Might have to pick that one up. Maybe not. Not really sure. It seems a bit, I mean, it seems a bit dystopian, does it not? It's like what an evil corporation would have. Like something like the Atlas Corporation from COD Advanced Warfare even. Into the pit lane then goes Fisher. I mean, this is going to be close. Surely this counts for him here. I mean, he's into the pit lane. He's got 4 seconds. He's got 4 seconds to the line, and he's rocketed into the pit lane, and the pit window shuts in his face. Oh my goodness. Oh, that is gut-wrenching for Joey Fisher. I mean, he played such a bizarre strategy, and it's come away from him right within seconds. Oh, that's brutal. That is unfathomably brutal. Will he have the shot there? It was so close when he got onto that pit limiter line. I think it was just after the pit window had shut. We'll see, though, because I think for Fisher, this is his goose cooked, as it would be. As he drops off the jacks, I think that was the yes, and it's not counted for him. So Joey Fisher is going to pick up a sizable penalty at the checkered flag. Big trouble for him. Also big trouble for the 114 as yellow flags came out for Ben Cheeseman, and you can see there the state of affairs surrounding the 114 McLaren. Look at the state of the nose down at the forward curve just in towards Dunlop now. Trouble for Cheeseman. So as it stands to be the case then, after pit stops now, Wright leads over Cheeseman, Jenkins in third, Cecil leads over Fisher and Belder. Fisher to drop sizable positions then, as he will have a penalty at the checkered flag for not having served all of his pit stops. Belder to move up into second. It could be a case where Cedric Grenier-Massey could move to a podium to turn his fortunes around in this race today. Right now, though, holds on to a Division 4th, Division 5th for Sanchez, Division 6th for Badensky, Division 7th for Potvin, Division 8th for Felix, Division 9th for Dupois, Division 10th for Veldkamp. And currently then a DNF for JM Quito. Now, in terms of the pros, of course, Wright, Cheeseman, Jenkins, then Division 4th for LeBay, 11th overall, and Division 15th for Donkin, 5th overall. 12.5 minutes left to go then. We'll leave you on board with the gambler of the grid, as it would be then, the 54, who's played quite a world-class strategy then. And we called this one well in advance. It'd be around 17 minutes he's into the pit lane. We're a few seconds... late, or a few seconds short, actually, I should say, because he come in about 16.50, but nearly bang on the money there. We'll leave you on board with Wright as he makes his way onto lap 51. Still on board then with Wright. 10.5 minutes left to go then here in the Nurburgring on what has been quite an eventful ride here on the final round of the championship of the Competizione Performance League World Series. And taking a look around then to find ourselves currently in the scope of things from the AMS. As now opens to be the case here if we go to locate that of Richard Cecil. Leads here in the AMS, looking to wrap things out with an 8th race win in division by the end of this season to solidify his position as the AM champion of the World Series Season 1. Right now, as it would stand to reason, we are in the ballpark of about 5 more laps left to go then, with Wright having crossed the line a few seconds ago. Could be more on the cards here for 4 laps as conditions continue to worsen. Right now, holding on to the notion from the weather radars that the rain is only going to continue to pick up now within the next 10 minutes. Those lap times are going to start coming further down and down. Now, if we take a look here, you can start to see where the weather has gone far on the wayside, because we've started to see, especially surrounding the last couple of laps, I'd say probably take a look from this point into where it starts to clear. And then we go from our average 205s, 206s, 204. This is where he's come into the pits, clearly. And then from there on after, conditions improve. And right around, having a glance here in these last couple of laps, where it's just nowhere near the performance he had when the weather was a lot on the clearer side. You can see it from watching on here with Richard Cecil, just the incredibly poor weather we have now. Out through the Hatzenbecksborgen. Has caught many drivers out there going on the curb on that right-hand side. Up in front is Matthew Badensky. Richard Cecil barely able to make out the image there of that 505 BMW. Linton right onto the back end of the BMW. Up and around Coca-Cola curve, still side by side here with the 505. The number 5 still holds strong on the run in towards lap 52. Now up and ahead here of Matthew Badensky. Backs off under the brakes on the run in towards turn 1. And he runs way out wide there in the case of the number 5, and Richard Cecil's around. He has turned around. Joey Fisher is only a few seconds out here. Very nearly contact between the pair of them. Of course, we have the understanding that Joey Fisher, while yes, leading on track, will suffer that penalty across the checkered flag. That will strip him of whatever win he may hold if he continues to stay up and ahead here of Richard Cecil. But now, firmly in the iron sights on that Porsche is the Ferrari number 59. Of course, his last lap didn't amount to anything because he wasn't able to give him, I believe, any new tyres. It didn't count towards his strategy. We'll see, though, if that comes to be the case, because now, with a sizable target on his back, Joey Fisher now leads in AM, albeit to what will be a penalty at the checkered flag today. Recent drama then from the AM category. Meanwhile, we saw recently then the 35 be taken for position as LeBay returns to an overall top 10. A very surprising turn then between these two, Joey Fisher and Richard Cecil. Fisher, who played a gamble and lost, and Cecil, who's had some recent troubles then on the rear axle. 6.5 minutes left to go then down through to Bitten Warsteiner here in the GP Strecker at the Nurburgring for the final round of the World Series. Cecil's not yet given up hope on his chances to return to that definitive lead of the AM category. Down through the Hutzenbecksbogen. We see that the Ferrari washes out to the left, back onto the racing line, just following in that trail of mist generated from the 296 in front. Number 59 still holds ground off the number 5, out through Vidal, in towards the Coca-Cola curves. Here at turn 16. Coming up into the same section that Cecil found trouble in on the last lap, ultimately what cost him that leading position. As we cross in to lap 53, just over 5.5 minutes left to go here in the Nürburgring. Glancing over Fisher's shoulder before we get down on towards the brakes in towards turn 1. You can see playing things far more hesitantly than the last lap, but that still doesn't stop the Porsche from rattling him down through at turn 1. Up through turn 2. Very little grip to be played with anymore now between these two. It looks like they're almost driving on an ice rink. There is very little grip to be found, and you can see their point in proving, because clipping onto those curbs in that Porsche could prove to be a bit of a death sentence here for that number 5. We've seen it cling very, very hardly to these cars. We see sliding in through at turn 6, now to turn 7 at the Ford curve. Just under 5 minutes left to go here in round 10. The last round of the season. For Joey Fisher today, it's definitely going to be a story of what if, because had it been a case he'd have been a few seconds faster to the line, that would have been a valid stop for him. Or had he just gone the lap before, that still could have likely been a valid enough stop for him. And that would have still put him in range here to go into this decisive lead. But alas, he does find himself still with that pit stop to serve, and with the pit window slammed shut in his face. He is going to find himself facing the music from race control at the checkered flag today. 4 minutes left to go. Looking in for the 54 here, we do find ourselves eyeing up possibly 2 more laps of racing. Now, it is worth pointing out, recently into the pit lanes goes the number 985 of Danny Felix. You can see for what reasons that is. Significant front end damage. So I had to backpedal on a previous statement there. You are able to take, I believe, repairs and tyres and fuel, but it does not count towards your strategy. Or perhaps it may be the case that it won't give you that at all. I mean, we'll see here from Danny Felix. This is actually our sort of our guinea pig here to see if that is a case where, yes, you can take repairs for damage, but it will not contribute to strategy. Not that it matters, of course, here for the 985. We'll see him later on in about 3.5 minutes. Kyle Jenkins in the gravel down at the Ford curve, going on a bit of an excursion here in the 113. I'd never take the 296 as a capable off-roader, but here we are. See then for Ben Cheeseman, holds on to second, Jenkins in third. Still two components then of an upcoming 5-star double podium to wrap out the season for this team. Sadly, though, won't be enough to put up a challenge against Malwar Racing's dominant lead of the Pro Teams Championship. We are but moments away then from the final lap here from Wright in the number 54. Meanwhile, we see here Joey Fisher versus Richard Cecil. Now, of course, we already know what's going to happen here for Joey Fisher. Oh, but now, that's certainly not what we were expecting to happen. Down in through the Dunlop Kara. You see there, Richard Cecil pumps the brakes and allows him to get back up in front. He doesn't want things to end on a sour note here. But he couldn't hesitate for too much longer. Otherwise, he would have invited in Sergio Belda, who can very much so still fight for position on track. We see Podensky in behind Cecil at the moment as we head in towards that final lap of racing. Right, just up in front of them, down through to Bitten Warsteiner. Actually, I believe it's just out behind them at this time, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. So going to catch back on board here. We'll actually see on board with Wright, who tries to navigate his way on through this traffic. You can see those significant spray over the nose, and I believe this one might be using the bonnet cam here because, of course, windscreen wiper's not on at all. So we'll use the bonnet cam to go along with it here for Wright. Down through to turn 16. Onto that final lap we go then with the number 54 Lexus. It's been a formidable drive for him so far. Now one more lap left to go before race win number 3 on the final round of the championship. We'll catch on with him in a moment's time, but back on board with the fight of the AM lead. Not for nothing, though. It has proven that Joey Fisher can absolutely fight for a race win. It's just a case where he can't, by looks of things here, devise a strategy daring enough. I don't think many drivers can do what Wright does on this grid, but hats off to Joey Fisher for certainly giving it a go. It definitely kept us on the edge of our seats here. And not for nothing, it will still come away with a decent performance today. And it's a point worth making here for the case of Fisher v Cecil, because it's just worth noting, behind them, albeit not too far away, is the 54 of Wright. So, as that stands to be the case, these two could actually see one more lap of racing over the 54 at this time. Just some food for thought there. The number 59 and the number 5 up and around the Schumacher S's in towards Bitten Warsteiner. Behind them is the 54. As we are now out of time on this race. With the Lexus only a few car lengths in behind, there is the possibility, slim as it may be, that he can get out past the pair. And then we see there with Brooklyn Donkin is actually pumping the brakes because he wants to wrap up as soon as possible. And is slowing down to allow for the arrival there of the 54. Making his way down through the Hatzenbecksborg and in towards the Vidal chicane here. On board with the 54 of Wright. Down through then to the Coca-Cola curve, the number 54 slows right down here, as it happens to be the case, to roll by looks of things almost in formation with the 119 down towards the line end on what has been a formidable performance by the 54 today. A gamble and a win to go along with it for Wright, his third victory at the end of this season. Of course, we wrapped up the Pro Drivers' Championship not too long ago then for the number 119 alongside him then, your Pro Division World Series champion Christian LeBay, now side by side with 3-time race winner Wright in the number 54. We'll be speaking in with him in a moment's time then. But we still have one more story to wrap up, and that pertains to our guys over in the AMS. We see though, hang on just a tick here, there's been some recent troubles between the 5 and the 59. I'm a little bit confused. I think Richard Cecil has he finished? I wasn't 100% sure there. We see that Joey Fisher is stationary And if he's stationary for much longer, that could be a black flag for him, because I don't think he's officially finished this race. Ben Cheeseman still has a distance to go here. Same story for Kyle Jenkins. These two still find themselves without a line, but Richard Cecil, knowing that Sergio Belda has been wrapped up for third, knowing that Cedric Grenier-Massey has been wrapped up for fourth and Sanchez for fifth, knows he holds the card for, at the very least, second. Fisher, along with him there, is to face the music in that regard. It's a bit of a confusing one. We'll see, though, with the official results. This is very relevant to us because we still have to confirm here who actually took the race win amongst the AMs, because they have left us in a bit of a confusing pinch. As we now see part of a 5-star double podium then. Cheeseman and Jenkins, a formidable foray for these two in the 114 and the 113. Cedric Grenier-Massey sees Division 4th, Division 5th for Ivan Sanchez at the time of recording, but again, still leaves us this erroneous case of the front row in AM. Joey Fisher still yet to have come into the pit lanes. Same story for that of Richard Cecil. We'll be speaking to him in a moment's time as well. We'll also be speaking to Cedric Grenier-Massey as part of our interview panel for the end of the World Series. That was one set up ahead of time by Race Control. We'll be contacting them shortly after this race concludes. But we are still waiting to see definitive results. Didier Potvin down to the line for 9th. Badensky looking at 10th, but he still has a few more corners here. So we'll wait for that official result, because this is very, very important now. As we do note, drivers then dropping out of the race. I think that was for the one... Not actually, no, not for the 119. That was the 114. My mistake there. And we see back into the pit lanes goes Badensky. So we still are waiting for the end of session timer. I think we are waiting on Joey Fisher here. And this has been a bit of a confusing one here for the 59. We'll wait for the official results. I believe we are able to confirm now Holkianos Motorsports are your AM Teams champions. So the team of JM Quito, Sergio Belda and Ivan Sanchez, champions in the AM Teams Championship. There you get to see the results of it. It's a very bizarre one because it technically shows Joey Fisher as your race winner in AM, but with that penalty applied, that would be Richard Cecil. Regardless of it, that would place Richard Cecil as your AM Drivers Champion. The number 5 then, regardless of if he got first or second, finds himself as the second of our 2 announced Drivers Champions, LeBay for the pros, and now we have the understanding Richard Cecil is an AM Drivers Champion here in the World Series. A great performance then by him. We'll be getting a word from him hopefully very, very soon here on this broadcast, so don't go anywhere before we wrap up here on this season. A very confusing drive then, but at the end of it all, your outright race winner for the 3rd time this season, the number 54 of Wright. We'll be speaking with him, as well as Cedric Grenier-Massey and Richard Cecil, as part of our interview panel for today. So if you do just bear with us here, we'll try and get a word in then from the first of our 3 drivers to interview. We'll start off with the race winner, then we'll go to the AM Drivers Champion, and then we'll speak in with Let's Race mates Cedric Grenier-Massey before we wrap up here on the final broadcast of Season 1 of the Competizione Performance League World Series. Back in a moment.
Green line. Give it all you got.
So the first interviewee of today, the final round of the World Series here. We're on board with the 54. Your race winner today, three-time race winner at this season. It's right, the number 54. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty well. Glad with the race win.
It was a very ambitious strategy as well. I mean, like we saw way back in round 4 in Watkins Glen, was that sort of something you were tapping back into for your performance today?
Yeah, oftentimes I play the long game. The crazy thing is with that story, at Watkins Glen, I work night shift, and so I actually overslept and just shown up literally at the perfect time, starting in the pit lane, and just happened to get lucky with the race win at Watkins.
And what are your hopes then for the run in towards season 2? Of course, it came through the announcement just before today's race. Season 2 will be coming up in October of 2026. Any plans for that?
So I do plan on jumping in until season 2. I've got a lot of practice and a lot of work that I still need to do. There's still a lot of really fast and really talented drivers on this grid, so it's going to definitely be a fight.
I suppose last but not least, this comes from a place of curiosity from us, because we've never been able to figure out the answers ourselves. What does the M stand for?
So actually, I go by 2 different names. I go by 2 different names, and they both start with M. So I just go by M.
Oh, right. Oh, fair enough. Oh, well, good on you. Well, that's, I suppose that answers the mystery then. We'll continue to call you by M right then. Very well done today, by the way. Your 3rd win of the season, again leveraging such an oddball strategy in the somewhat immortal Lexus.
Yeah, it was definitely a challenging season. I had a lot of people like Donkin and Tongway that I was battling with. I ended up running into a lot of bad luck throughout the season. At the beginning of the season, it was like really kind of cutthroat and get your elbows out. I was trying to learn my place. After the Watkins Glen victory, like I was sitting like really high mentally, and then shortly after that, I just ended up getting into a slump. I ended up trying to go for a really ambitious strategy and Red Bull ring, and ended up not working out. And then took a drive-through penalty at Spa, so it kind of pushed me down in the rankings. But I got lucky with some disconnects and people not showing up. So it definitely kind of gives me an eye that I definitely need to be fighting and get my elbows out, pick up the pace for next season.
Well, it's been certainly a fantastic display of force, and there's very high hopes then for your possibility to fight for a championship in Season 2. Look, enjoy the result today. It's been fantastic to hear from you this season. Very, very well done. All the best to you.
Thank you very much.
Take care. All the best. And so that was your race winner for today then, M. Wright and the number 54 Lexus. Next on then, we'll be speaking in with Richard Cecil, your driver's champion in the AM category. It has been a fantastic season for him then. Ever faithful to Porsche. We'll be next on with him. Do give us one moment.
Green light. Give it all you got.
And next on then, your AM Drivers Champion here in the World Series Season 1, it's Richard Cecil. Richard, how are you feeling then?
I am absolutely wrung out, sweating like a pig. That was an amazing race.
Plenty of twists and turns and a very controversial ending then. I'm pretty sure under technicality that you've got that as your 8th race win this season. That's still kind of up in the air. Very weird finishing order, but nonetheless, a Drivers' Championship to go along with it. Ever faithful to Porsche then, and that's paid off in the long run for this race, especially today. Very trying conditions.
Indeed. I think for the GT3 class, I'm going to stick with my Porsche. I just love the car, and I feel like I'm just getting to know it and doing really well. Jay Fisher was absolutely brutal today. He was on it. I managed to spin right near the end there and got by me, and we were having a heck of a fight. I think maybe he just crossed the line into the pits maybe a second or two too late to get before the pit window closed. So I think that's probably what happened. It's unfortunate for him. I thought he had a great race.
Yeah, we saw it on our feeds as well. So when he came into the pits, I think it was 15:01 just before the line, so it crossed over into 15 seconds just as he hit the limiter on the entry to the pit lane. So it was brutal for him there, but he's put on a great performance, and as have you as well. It's been fantastic throughout this season for you to see. We've seen 7 definitive wins then across the line there, possibly an 8th after rulings today. It's been an absolute powerhouse performance. So what are your thoughts then for the run-in towards Season 2 of the World Series in October?
Well, I'm very excited for the next season because I think we're splitting it into 2 or 3 different classes. I think, or maybe I'm thinking of the other GT4s. Never mind. Anyway, I think I'm going to bump into the pros. I hope, and I'm excited about a new challenge with those guys and trying to get faster. Very excited about it, though.
Well, it looks to be a very bright road ahead for you, and coming out of this championship now, a bit of a target on your back as the now defending AM champion. So all power to you there. It's been a brilliant, brilliant season. Wonderful hearing from you today, and very, very well done with your result throughout both the championship and today's race as well.
Thank you so much, Regan. You do an amazing job commentating as always.
My pleasure, my pleasure. All the best.
Thank you.
And that was your Drivers' Champion then for the AM category, Richard Cecil. Now, last but not least, on our interview itinerary, we've been informed to get a touch in here with one of the newest teams on the block, the Let's Racemate team, and to represent them, we'll be contacting Cedric Grenier-Massey to reflect on his and the team's wider performance on a very late entry into this championship. Do bear with. We're having a few issues here trying to reach out to Grenier-Massey. Do just give us a moment. Okay, well, sadly, I believe we may be having some continued issues trying to reach out there to Cedric Grenier-Massey. It's not getting through to anybody at the moment. Oh, wait, hang on just one moment. We'll give it one more attempt. And the last of our interviewees today then, Let's Race mates Cedric Grenier-Massey. Cedric, how are you feeling?
Hi, Clark. How you doing, man?
Very good. Yourself?
Yes, sir.
And how do you think the season's gone for you and the Let's Race Mate team as one of the sort of newest teams on the block to this grid?
It was a really competitive championship with a lot of strong drivers. I'm really happy with my result, especially because I joined middle season. I mean.
And what would you say your hopes are for the run in towards season 2?
I can't wait for the next season, man. I'm ready. And yeah, let's race, mate.
Well, what a better way to put it there. What a fantastic result it's been for you today then. And for the team, wish you all the best of luck then. I definitely see it on good authority. You could give quite a lot of grief then in towards the AM Teams Championship. Is that likely where you're expectant to remain then? Would you say your prospects right now are to come up through AM in towards Pro?
Yeah, I'll keep pushing and I'll keep studying my setups and training a lot. And also for Bedensky, he's gonna come stronger.
Yeah, apologies about the interruption there. The dog just started kicking off. But yes, I look forward to seeing that from you two as well, because it's been a fantastic drive from both you and Bedensky in such an early stint of time here, very late into the season. Not had a lot of time to sort of prove yourselves on the grid, but you've done so nonetheless. So I wish you all the best of luck for the run into season 2. It's going to be a very strong performance. And in your words, let's race, mate.
Thank you so much, Clark. Yeah, you're doing a crazy job. And I want to say thank you also to Christian to invite me in CPL. That was a very nice season.
It's our pleasure here from TRTN to cover every step of the way from your entry into the series to where we stand now here at the end of season 1. And it's been a pleasure from us here to cover every step of the way from your entry into the league into where we stand now at the end of season 1 on the run in towards season 2. It's been a fantastic time speaking with you today, and all the best of you. All the best to you, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you so much, Clark.
Take care. That was Cedric Grenier-Massey of Let's Race, mate. So definitely a confidence time for the run-in towards season 2 with these two, with both Grenier-Massey and Bedensky, where it has been a bit of a rocky road for the pair today. At the end of it, still solid results nonetheless for these two. That currently then concludes everything here in World Series Season 1. Your race winner for today then writes your Drivers' Champion in Pro being Christian Lebay, and as you heard there not too long ago, your Drivers' Champion in AM is Richard Cecil. Your Team's Champion in Pro is Malwar Transport. Not Malwar Transport, sorry, Malwar Racing. Our sponsor is Malwar Transport. Malwar Racing win in the Pro Teams Championship, and in the AM Teams Championship, it is Holkianos Motorsports. What a season it's been then here on the World Series, and a wonderful project to get on board with from here on TRTN. It's been a fantastic trip with us to come alongside and see the sort of international theatre now explored by the Competizione Performance League, away from what has been a more national competition over on the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. Brilliant season in all, and very well done to all the drivers throughout. And just before we go here, having one last look at those wins. Now, of course, tonight's wins we saw in the Pro for round 10 was right. We saw that definitively across the line. And then in the AMs, that's still a bit of a coin toss here. I'm pretty certain once the case gets reviewed, it would technically be Richard Cecil. Otherwise, it's Joey Fisher. But nonetheless, a brilliant race between those two. Gave us definitely a lot to speak of towards the end of today's race, and a very peculiar finish in all. But what a great season it's been then. And that's all from us here on TRTN. If you're catching on with us tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. BST, we're live for round 2 of the NLRL Sunday League Season 6, powered by TRTN. We're live from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the first triple stint of the season. That's all from us. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, and big thanks to our sponsors over at Malwar Transport for covering us every step of the way here and supporting us throughout this season. That's all from us. Take care and good night.